It's been a rough day, to put it mildly. The dog, as usual, had me up at the crack of dawn for her morning walk. We stepped outside, and I froze. 3 police cars were parked right in front of the neighbor's house. In my quiet little neighborhood, that's not something you see every day. Naturally, I was curious. My first thought was maybe it was a domestic issue, but that didn't add up. The folks next door, Janie and Bill, are the sweetest couple, and their son Devon is a great kid. No history of drama, not even a hint. The cop cars stayed there for a while, and I kept sneaking glances through the kitchen window, trying to figure out what was going on without being too nosy. Sometime before noon, a black van pulled up, and not long after, I saw them wheel out a body from the house. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to barge in on their grief, so I stayed put. We're friendly with Janie, Bill, and Devon, but not super close, so I figured I'd let them reach out when they were ready. I couldn't tell who was in the body bag. Bill's a big guy, and based on the shape, it definitely wasn't him. None of them were sick as far as I knew, so this didn't feel like an expected death. The police hung around for hours, but there was no crime scene tape, no forensic van, nothing like that. It's been dead quiet over there since. Their car hasn't moved all afternoon, and the house is completely dark. Around 11 p.m., I took the dog out for her evening walk. We do a loop around the block, and as we got close to their house, I saw Devon standing in their driveway. I don't know why, but it gave me chills. I didn't know what to say, or if I should say anything at all. I still had no clue what had happened that morning, but seeing him there, I started to assume it was Janie who'd passed. What do you even say to a kid in that situation? But how could I just walk by and say nothing? So as I got closer, I called out, "Hey, Devon, you doing okay?" He was staring out at the lake across the street, but when he heard my voice, he turned, gave me a small smile, and then, just like that, he was gone. Not like he walked away or faded out. It was like someone flipped a switch, and he vanished. Their car still wasn't there, and the house was still dark. I don't know what I saw, but it shook me to my core. I've never seen anything like that before, and it's got me rattled. I spent the rest of the night scouring the internet for answers, trying to make sense of it, and that's how I ended up here, wondering if anyone else has ever experienced something this weird. I barely slept last night, maybe an hour tops. Seeing Devon disappear like that in the driveway wasn't the last time I saw him either. I spent most of the night pacing or sitting in my office chair, too unsettled to rest. My wife's an early bird and was already in bed before any of this went down, so I didn't wake her. She was just as upset as I was about whatever happened next door. When she got up this morning, the first thing she asked was if I'd heard anything about the neighbors. I decided not to tell her about what I saw, at least not yet. Our garage is detached, connected to the house by a pergola with a table and chairs underneath. I parked my car just beyond it. Last night, I kept glancing at the front door, half expecting something. Around 3:30 a.m., I saw a figure walk through the patio and up to my car. It was dark, so I couldn't make out details, but it was about Devon's size and shape. I would have thought it was him even without the weird driveway moment earlier. The figure just sat down on the ground by the driver's door for a minute or two, then vanished. Poof, gone. Now, I could convince myself I imagined it. The motion sensor light out front didn't even trip, and those things are sensitive. They only turn on when something moves, and you can only switch the power on or off from inside the house. If something was out there, the light should have come on. I don't know what to believe. This morning, around 9 a.m., my wife spotted a familiar blue SUV pulling into the neighbor's driveway. It was Chip, Devon's uncle. She asked me to go talk to him. I know Chip pretty well. We worked together to take down part of their fence when they got a shed installed. He's a good guy. I walked over, a little nervous, and called out to him, asking if everything was okay, and saying I knew something had happened. Chip, who I've never seen without a smile, just shook his head and looked at the ground as he walked across the lawn. He said he was there to pick up some things for his brother and his wife, who were staying with him for a while. Then he dropped the bomb. Devon had died. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I let out a choked sigh, fighting back tears. I told him how sorry I was and asked if there was anything I could do. He said there was nothing anyone could do. and his body language made it clear he didn't want to talk. I pushed a little and asked what happened. He said they weren't sure yet, but it was likely an aneurysm. Apparently, Devon had a benign tumor removed from behind his eye a couple of years ago. It was a scary time, but the surgery was supposed to be a complete success. He'd seemed perfectly healthy since. I immediately assumed the aneurysm was related to that surgery. We've known Janie and Bill for about 10 years, ever since they moved in. They're genuinely kind people. We'd chat over lawnmowers or hang out at block parties. We've had them over a couple of times, and we've been to their place, but that was the extent of it. Devon was the glue, though. He was the neighborhood's little ambassador when they first moved in. We watched him grow up from a kid to a teenager who was always looking for odd jobs to fund his skateboard obsession. I kept him busy with small tasks whenever I could. I'm sitting here now, eyes watering, struggling to type. I'm not just saying this because he's gone, but I really love that kid. He was a good one. I had to tell my wife, and she broke down immediately. After a while, she was determined to reach out to Janie, but didn't want to intrude. She sent a text, figuring it was the least pushy way, letting Janie know we were there for whatever they needed. But I can't shake the question, did I really see Devon last night? Why me? Why was he there? Is he still around? I'm freaking out. This isn't the first time I've felt something off. I've had sleepless nights my whole life because of this thing that watches me at night. It usually happens around 1 or 2 a.m. I wake up, and it feels like something's in the room with me, staring. It's always the same. I open my eyes, and I just know something's there. My chest tightens, like butterflies are clawing their way up to my throat. I'm terrified, on the verge of screaming, but I usually fall back asleep pretty quickly. It's been happening since I was a kid, no matter where I've lived, different houses, cities, even other people's homes. Sometimes it hits several nights in a row, then nothing for months, even years. This month, though, it's been bad 5 or 6 times. 2 nights ago, my wife and I had a stupid fight, the kind that starts small but is really about all the stuff you've let slide. I ended up sleeping on the living room couch, too tired and angry to care. I woke up to that same feeling of being watched, but I brushed it off and went back to sleep. The next day, though, my wife told me something that chilled me to the bone. She said she came into the living room for round 2 of our argument and saw me sitting on the couch, giving her the angriest, ugliest, most evil look she'd ever seen in our 12 years together. She said she was genuinely scared of me for the first time ever. She went back to the bedroom, locked the door, and then heard me scream, "What do you want?" A few minutes later, she said I started moaning and crying, like I was being tortured. She thought I was having a nightmare. The thing is, I don't remember any of it, not sitting up, not screaming, not crying. Nothing. I don't know what this thing is. I don't even know if it's evil or if I'm just startled because I don't understand it. All I know is it's been watching me for at least 15 years. The first time I stayed at my in-laws' place, I felt it watching me from across the room. A couple of years ago, I woke up feeling it grab my lower back while I was asleep. Once, when my wife and I were staying at a friend's house, I felt it standing by the side of the bed. I wondered if I'm losing it. Maybe I'm schizophrenic, or it's stress-related. But then there's my wife. She's had nightmares about the same thing. One night, I woke up freaked out from a dream about a small shadow floating over my body. 30 seconds later, she woke up terrified, hugged me, and said she'd dreamt of a shadow dancing and floating over me. I've never told anyone about this before, and I'm starting to think it's real. I don't know if it's paranormal or what, but I'm not making it up. I'm not looking for help either. I don't think I'm in danger. If I was, something would have happened by now, right? I guess I just needed to get this off my chest. The truth is out there. Let me set the scene. My best friend Kayla and I, both in our early 20s, were working a seasonal gig at a hiking lodge in British Columbia over the summer. She's from New Brunswick, where she goes to school, and I'm a chef in Toronto during the winter. This year, instead of flying home, we decided to do an epic coast-to-coast Canadian road trip since I just bought a car. It was an absolute blast. Things went so well that we ended up lingering in a few unexpected spots, which meant we had to cut the East Coast leg of our trip short. Kayla had to start school on November 1st, so I dropped her off at her place in Moncton, New Brunswick on Halloween and crashed there for the night. I was planning to head back to Toronto the next day, but after a few glasses of Chardonnay and some good laughs, I realized I couldn't come this close to the East Coast without checking off a bucket list item, the Cabot Trail in Nova Scotia. I've been dreaming about it for years. So, with a week of vacation left before my winter contract, I impulsively booked a hostel for the next day, November 1st, at a place called the Acolyte Hostel on the Cabot Trail. It was the only option that popped up, probably because I was booking last minute. A private dorm with a queen-size bed for $35? I thought I'd scored a bargain and booked it without a second thought. I left Kayla's place in Moncton at 7 a.m., knowing it was going to be a long drive. The Cabot Trail is about 150 kilometers, so to play it safe, I plugged the hostel's address into Google Maps and headed straight there to get my bearings. I figured I'd arrive around noon, too early to check in, but I could chat with the front desk about nearby hiking trails and drop my bags off later. As I got close to the hostel, according to Google, at least, there was nothing but farmland around me. Google said my destination was on the left, but I didn't see anything. About 50 yards up the road, I spotted a wire barbed gate with a bright red A spray painted on it. I figured that must be the Acolyte Hostel and turned down the dirt road. It led me to what I can only describe as a rundown barn. No signs, no nothing, just two cars parked out front. I pulled up alongside them, got out, and tried to figure out where the heck I was. As soon as I stepped out, this smallish guy, maybe mid-40s with dark hair and intense eyes, popped out of the barn. He asked if I was staying with him tonight. I said yeah, and he immediately wanted to know why I'd booked so last minute. I explained my road trip situation, and he seemed satisfied enough. He insisted on giving me the grand tour of the barn. Right off the bat, I noticed the whole place had this creepy vibe. The foundation was dug out about 5 feet deep and 3 feet wide all around, with particle board laid down as a makeshift ramp to get inside. The second thing that hit me was there were no windows. This was clearly a barn meant for livestock, not people. The guy, Kevin, the owner, started rattling off his big plans for the place, but it all sounded pretty far-fetched. The barn was just a big open space with particle board dividing it into what he called rooms. He led me up these rickety stairs, basically plywood and 2x4s, to the cabin loft where I'd be sleeping. It was me, his family, his 5-year-old son, and his mom, who he insisted I call Mom. The upstairs was totally open concept, with flimsy curtains separating the beds and a big empty space in the middle. I asked if I was the only guest that night, and he said yeah. I got the feeling they didn't get many visitors. I told him I was keen to check out some hikes in the area before it got dark, and he gave me super detailed directions to his favorite trails. So off I went. The place wasn't ideal, and I wish the website had mentioned it was still under construction, but I booked last minute, so beggars can't be choosers, right? Plus, Kevin was friendly and helpful with the hiking tips, so I brushed it off. I hiked around until it started getting dark. I hadn't packed enough food for the day, so I figured I'd grab dinner in town. The nearest town was clearly a tourist hotspot in the summer, but in the off-season, it was a ghost town. All the hotels and B&Bs were boarded up, and even the liquor store was closed. I finally found a dark, dingy bar to eat at. The meal was, to put it nicely, a letdown. I'd had this romantic image of sipping bubbly on the waterfront, eating fresh oysters. Instead, I got fried oysters that were definitely not fresh, according to the server, who was also the bartender and cook. With no other options for things to do, I decided to head back to the hostel around 8 p.m. to read my book. When I got there, I could smell that the family was cooking dinner. A little boy, Kevin's son, JP, came bounding down the wooden steps to greet me. "Hi, my name's JP. What's yours?" he said, all excited like kids are. I smiled and said, "Nice to meet you, JP. I'm Alex." He immediately asked if I wanted to play. I told him I'd love to, but I needed to drop my bags in my room first. He followed me through the see-through curtains to my room, so instead of getting settled, I headed back out to the main area with him. We started tossing a foam ball around while his mom, dad Kevin, and grandmother Tom sat down to eat, barely acknowledging us. Then Kevin and his wife started arguing. It began as a low-key disagreement but quickly turned into full-on yelling. I was completely weirded out. I told JP I needed to go to my room to call my mom, saying she was wondering where I was. Of course, JP, being a kid with no sense of boundaries, followed me through the curtains and plopped down on my bed. I tried to distract him by asking about school, his favorite color, stuff like that. His mom started calling for him, but he ignored her, choosing instead to climb onto my lap and hug me. Not wanting to stir up trouble, I called out to his mom that he was in my room. She stormed in, snatched him off my lap, and yelled at Kevin, "I know what you're like when you get this angry. I'm taking JP. Don't follow us." I heard her bolt downstairs, and Kevin ran after her. A car started up in the lot and peeled out of the driveway. Then I heard Kevin cursing, a door slam, and the sound of an excavator outside firing up. I guess he was blowing off steam by doing some late-night digging or something. That left just me and Mom upstairs. I grabbed my bag, walked out of my so-called room, and said, "Hey, listen, you guys have been great hosts, but I really need to go." Mom started rubbing my arm, telling me to stay, saying her daughter-in-law didn't understand Kevin and was the real problem. I was ready to tell her to get lost, but then I noticed she was still holding a 4-inch paring knife from cooking dinner. I don't think she meant it as a threat. She seemed like a kooky old lady who didn't get social cues, but there she was, rubbing my arm with one hand and waving the knife around with the other. I started inching toward the stairs, closer to the door, while she kept going on about how I should stay and how her grandson was special. She even said he'd had a premonition that I'd be staying with him before I booked. That was my cue to get out. As soon as I hit the door, I sprinted to my car, started the engine, and tried to back out of the lot. But Kevin, in the excavator, was blocking the path with a 5-foot ditch on one side and the forest behind me. He got out and apologized, saying I should stay and he'd make it up to me. Mom came out, still holding the knife, blaming Kevin for me leaving. They started bickering, and it went on for a solid 5 minutes. I'd had enough. I yelled that if they didn't let me leave, I'd call the police. Suddenly, they got super defensive, like I was the one being unreasonable. I turned off my engine and started dialing. Kevin climbed back into the excavator and backed it up. As soon as I saw an opening, I turned the engine back on, floored it across the grass, probably doing a number on my sedan suspension, and got out of there. Once the property was out of sight, I tried to call Kayla, but there was no service. I remembered earlier that afternoon, when I first got to the hostel, I noticed a no service sign on my phone. Even if I'd wanted to call the cops, I couldn't have. I drove 6 hours straight back to Moncton and stayed with Kayla. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and this happened when I was visiting my mom's apartment for the weekend with my sister. We go there every weekend or every other weekend to see her. We got to her place around 10 a.m., lugging our pillows, movies, and whatever else we had in from my grandma's car. We settled in, chilling on the couch, watching TV for a couple of hours. Around noon, my sister said she was hungry. Mom was like, "Okay, what do you want?" "Pizza." I said I was cool with pizza, and Mom decided she'd run to Kroger's, which is less than a mile away, to grab some stuff. She also mentioned picking up a couple of movies from Redbox. My sister asked if she could tag along to Kroger's, and Mom asked me if I'd be okay staying in the apartment by myself. I told her I'd be fine. I knew I would. "We'll be gone 20 minutes tops, okay?" she said. She doesn't love leaving me alone, but she figured it'd be all right, as she told me later. Her apartment's in kind of a rough area. There's been talk of sex trafficking, drug dealers, thieves, that kind of thing. But it's on the 3rd floor of one of many buildings surrounded by neighbors, so I thought I'd be safe. "Lock the door, okay?" Mom said. "And you know not to open it unless it's me, right?" I nodded. "Yes, Mom, I'll be fine." Headed out soon after. I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone with Jerry Springer blaring in the background. About 10 minutes after they left, I heard the doorknob jiggle. I didn't panic right away, but I was definitely on edge. I should mention I carry a pocket knife everywhere. It's got a 3 or 4-inch blade, and it was sitting on the coffee table in front of me. I got up to check the door. I'm only 5 feet 3 inches, so I grabbed a chair to stand on and peeked through the peephole. That's when my heart dropped. There was this guy I'd never seen before, just standing there, messing with a doorknob. He looked Mexican, and one of his eyes was so yellow I thought he might have jaundice or something. I tried to laugh off the fear, telling myself he probably just had the wrong apartment. I mean, I don't know everyone in the building, but I've seen most of the neighbors at least once, and this guy was definitely not one of them. Still, I didn't want to assume the worst. So I called out, "Hey man, I think you got the wrong room." He froze, his eyes locked on the doorknob, then shifted to the peephole. I swear we made eye contact. It was like he knew exactly where I was standing. Then, out of nowhere, he started slamming his shoulder into the door, like full-on football tackle style. I jumped off the chair, grabbed my phone and knife, and bolted into a room with a window, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I called my mom's friend Jess, who lives in the apartment building across the street. I was crying hysterically. "Jess, someone's trying to break in. Call the cops and bring Chris, please. Just get over here." She didn't hesitate. "Oh crap, okay, we're coming," she said. I hung up and immediately dialed my mom. The guy was still ramming the door, yelling in frustration now. Mom picked up after a few rings, and I blurted out what I'd told Jess, adding that Jess and her boyfriend Chris were on their way, and she needed to hurry. All she said was, "I'm coming." By the time I saw Jess and Chris racing down 2 flights of stairs and across the street, Mom was flying down the road. They must have gotten there within seconds of my call. I heard a commotion in the hallway, everyone yelling. I unlocked the bedroom door and peeked out of the apartment. Chris had the guy pinned against the wall, Mom was hugging me tight, and Jess was screaming at the dude. Long story short, the police showed up and took my statement. The guy first tried to play it off, saying he thought it was his apartment. But then he confessed he wanted to see me and talk to me because he thought I was pretty. The cops put him in handcuffs and ran a background check. No surprise, he had a warrant out for assaulting a woman and had been arrested for kidnapping before. We didn't sleep that night. I'm a 25-year-old stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, and I don't feel safe in my apartment anymore. We moved in almost 3 years ago, and when we did, I put a second lock on the door. At the time, it was mostly to keep our daughter, who was only 2, from wandering out. But now, I'm convinced that lock has been keeping someone else out. A few months ago, something weird happened that didn't seem like a big deal at first, but it's been eating at me, making me feel paranoid and unsafe. The first time it happened, my daughter wasn't in school yet, and my son was just a few months old. My partner works different hours every day, but he usually lets me know when he'll be home so I can unlock the top lock for him to let himself in with his key. Our daughter, who was 4 at the time, loves greeting her dad at the door when he gets home. That night, though, it wasn't him she greeted. I was sitting on the couch, holding my baby boy, when I thought I heard someone try to open the door. It stopped because it was locked, which happens sometimes. My partner will absent-mindedly try the handle before using his key. My daughter heard it too, and ran to the door like she always does. For some reason, this time she decided to unlock it and open it herself to greet him, which she doesn't normally do. I heard the door open and then slam shut. I was about to scold her for opening it without me when she came back and said, in her sweet, innocent voice, "It wasn't Daddy." That threw me off. I got a little freaked out, locked both locks, and asked her if it was one of the neighbors. We know our neighbors pretty well, but she said no, it was just some guy. She didn't get why I was asking all these questions. She was just being her carefree self. I told my partner about it when he got home, and we had a serious talk with her about never opening the door on her own again. I tried to brush it off as a weird one-off and didn't think too much of it. A few weeks later, though, I heard that same sound again, someone trying to open the door but getting stopped by the lock. I tried not to let it get to me, but it was hard to shake. Then one night, around 12:30 a.m., the kids were in bed, and my partner and I were watching late-night TV. We heard the door rattle again, but this time, whoever it was rang the doorbell and gave a light knock. My partner looked through the peephole and saw 3 guys standing there. I told him not to open the door. No way. He said they just left, but when I peeked out the window carefully, because I didn't want to be seen, I didn't see anyone leave. It made me think they might have been lurking in the stairwell, waiting for us to answer. I wanted to call the police, but I wasn't sure if someone rang the bell and tried the door was enough for them to care about, so I didn't. I started feeling more paranoid after that, like we were being targeted. I know that sounds dramatic, but we've lived here for 3 years, and this stuff only started happening in the last few months. The scariest incident happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. My partner was working a late shift, and it was almost 3 a.m. Our daughter, who's almost 5 now, sometimes has nightmares and comes to us when she does. She'll climb down from her loft bed and run to our room. That night, we heard what we thought was her getting up and running to our door. My partner got up to check on her, but he gave me this weird look. Right then, there was a huge thud at the front door, followed by the sound of someone running down the stairs outside. We realized it wasn't our daughter, it was someone else. My partner checked the peephole, but no one was there. I looked out the window and didn't see anyone either. That night, I gathered the kids, brought them into our bedroom, locked the door, and pushed something heavy in front of it. I had a full-on panic attack, so bad I thought I might need a doctor. I ended up crying myself to sleep quietly, so I wouldn't wake the kids. The next morning, we called the landlord, who said she'd try to get someone to patrol the area. Since then, I haven't opened the door for anyone unless I know they're coming over. Things have been quiet until today, which is why I'm writing this. I just gotten out of the shower. My daughter was at school, my partner was at work, and my son was in his pack and play. I was trying to dry off when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I wasn't going to answer. Then I heard the door handle rattle, like someone was trying to open it. I froze. I was so tired of this crap. I threw on a robe, grabbed a knife just in case, and checked the peephole. No one was there. I'm done. I'm looking into moving because I can't handle living here anymore. I feel unsafe and violated, especially with my kids in the house. I just needed to vent. I'm a 20-year-old living in a small, quiet town in the Netherlands where crime is practically unheard of. Maybe a random burglary every few months, but that's it. I moved here with my parents when I was 12, coming from a big city, so my folks are super cautious. They always lock the doors, and at night, when everyone's home, they use this hook-shaped lock on the top and bottom of the door that you can only open by hand from the inside. Right now, I'm taking care of my mom, who's bedridden after a major surgery to remove a bunch of tumors. It's tough, and I miss some uni classes and can't be gone for long, but I'm okay with it. Still, being cooped up with a cranky mom, love her to bits, but she can drive me up the wall. Gets to me sometimes. To get out of the house for a bit, I started playing Pokemon Go again. It gives me an excuse to take a quick 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. Our street's shaped like a circle, and there's a field about 150 meters wide behind all the houses, with 3 playgrounds. One's right behind my backyard. The streetlights only shine through 3 openings, so it gets pretty dark back there. My routine is to hit the poke stop at the playground, light a cigarette, and start walking. About a week ago, I was in the field, eyes on my phone, hunting Pokemon. I pulled out my lighter to spark up, and I noticed someone else toss a cigarette, but it was too dark to make out who it was. Going from my phone's bright screen to pitch blackness messed with my eyes. By the time they adjusted, the person had already slipped through the opening on the right side, out of sight behind a hedge. I didn't think much of it. There are a lot of teens in the neighborhood, and I figured it was just some kid sneaking a smoke. I finished my route, went home, and crashed. The next day, I went back to the playground and noticed a ridiculous amount of cigarette butts by the slide, around 15 of them. That's weird because I sit there a lot since it's right by a poke stop and a gym. We'd done a raid there the day before, and I'm positive those butts weren't there then. As someone who reads creepypastas, my mind went straight to the guy from the night before. I started wondering if he wasn't just some teen but maybe a creep, especially since the slide's right by the house of one of the prettiest girls in town. To be safe, I sent her a message about it and went back to my routine, trying not to overthink it. That night, around 11 p.m., I went back to the field. Before stepping into view, I turned off my phone's screen and peeked around the corner. Sure enough, there he was lurking by the playground. Even though I half expected it, my heart started racing. I stood there for a second, thinking it over. I decided to walk out like everything was normal, just a friendly neighborhood guy. But I slipped my keys between my fingers like brass knuckles, just in case. I've read too many creepy stories to take chances. The second I stepped out, the guy bolted through one of the exits. It caught me off guard, and I froze for a moment before jogging after him toward the lit-up street. He was long gone by the time I got there. After that, I started carrying a sharpened CS, Go replica knife whenever I went out at night. The next night, I did my usual peek around the corner move, but he wasn't there. I felt a bit relieved, but still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. You know that paranoid vibe when you're a horror fan? Every little sound feels amplified. I was contesting the gym, which takes about 5 minutes, and I kept listening for anything off. My own footsteps were so loud they annoyed me, drowning out other noises. I was messing up the game because I was so on edge, so I tried to focus on my phone. But then a few seconds later, I heard sticks snapping, not like a bird rustling, but like a dog crashing through bushes to chase a ball. It was maybe 10 meters away. I didn't even try to finish the game. I just bolted toward my house. The worst part, as I ran, I heard the bushes rustle loudly behind me. I'm pretty sure it was that guy hiding for some reason. I decided I was done with the playground at night and stuck to Pokestops under streetlights. I didn't see the guy again, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched every time I went out after dark. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but it kept nagging at me. One night, I stopped and looked back at a spot where, if someone was following me, they'd have to hurry to keep up. There's a 20-meter stretch where they couldn't hide if I turned around quick enough. I peeked through some bushes, not around them, and there he was. My heart pounded. I dropped into the bushes, grabbed my knife, and held my breath, waiting. He came into view, looking around because there were 2 paths I could have taken. What freaked me out most was him mouthing something, looked like "damn it," before jogging down the path I usually take. That sealed it for me. I wasn't just being paranoid. This guy was following me. I ran home, unlocked the door, got inside, and locked the extra locks. I stopped playing Pokemon Go at night altogether and told my friends on the street to avoid it too. I explained everything, but they thought I was just spooked because I'm a horror fan and it was close to Halloween. 3 days later, I was outside smoking with my neighbor friend, and I noticed different cigarette butts on the sidewalk. It creeped me out. I'd already told my neighbor about the guy, but now he was more interested, seeing I wasn't messing around. We finished our smokes quick and went back inside. That night, at around 2:15 a.m., I got a text from my brother. "Are you home?" I texted back. "Yeah, why?" He replied, "Thought I heard the door, like someone getting in." That freaked me out because you can't even try to open our door without a key. The extra lock can only be opened from the inside, and the main lock needs a key since there's no doorknob. Someone must have had a key and tried to get in but couldn't. I grabbed the sword I bought at Comic-Con and went downstairs. I slid the curtain aside and looked out the front door. There he was, staring back at me. He was wearing a hoodie, and with his back to the streetlights, I couldn't see his face, just a silhouette. He slowly turned and walked away. I figured he was trying to pick the lock. I didn't sleep at all until I knew my brother was awake in the morning. The next day, my mom had to go back to the hospital because her stitches got messed up when she tried to move the couch. She's stubborn as heck and even got mad at me for coming in late the night before. She swore she heard me trying to open the door and my brother letting me in, but I knew she was mistaken. Still, she definitely heard something. When I got home from the hospital alone, I noticed the living room door was open. We just got a new dog who loves sneaking upstairs, so we're usually careful to close that door. But there he was upstairs looking down at me. That's when it hit me. I ran to the garage, grabbed my sword, and started checking the house, yelling, "I know you're in here. I'll kill you." I heard someone sprint downstairs as I got to my brother's room on the other side of the upstairs hallway. I chased after him, saw him dart out, but he was gone before I could get close. I called the cops, and we had the locks changed that same day. The weird thing, nothing was stolen. But when I checked my closet later, I noticed my clothes were pushed back like someone had made space to hide. There was no sign of forced entry, so we figured he got in with the spare key we kept hidden in a pillow on one of our outdoor chairs. Since no one was home, the extra lock wasn't on. I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't as paranoid as I am, but I'm damn glad I was. I'm a 5 feet 6 inches stocky guy, about 160 pounds, though most people think I look 30 pounds lighter, which comes in handy more often than you'd think. I'm not the guy you'd pick to help move heavy furniture, let's just say that. I've seen my fair share of rough stuff in life, so I'm always ready to handle things if they get dicey. The other star of this story is my girlfriend's pit bull, Bubba, a beautiful, good-natured service dog who weighs in at 87 pounds. I've got to emphasize that he's a total sweetheart, despite the bad rap pit bulls sometimes get. He's a seizure assist dog and a giant teddy bear. I've seen him let a 5-year-old ride him like a pony, and he's more likely to lick you to death than cause any trouble. The only thing he doesn't vibe with is cats, but otherwise, he's out there trying to make friends with every dog he meets. He's basically an 87-pound lap dog, and he's the best boy. This happened about 3 weeks ago on a chilly Sunday morning. Fall was settling in, and I was parked on the couch, watching some CSI knockoff. Bubba, true to form, trotted over to the front door and rang the bell we got set up for him. He let out a whine and a particularly nasty fart, his way of saying, "Hey, I gotta go now." It was a brisk 38 degrees outside, so I grudgingly grabbed my jacket and a cigarette to keep me occupied, leashed him up, and headed out. As we stepped outside, I lit my smoke, letting Bubba know the clock was ticking, and let him lead the way, within reason of course, to wherever he wanted to do his business. We ended up at this small field not far from our place, a spot he loves. It's an empty lot, probably had a house on it once, but now it's just waist to chest-high weeds, thanks to a wet summer. Perfect place for Bubba to fertilize the earth. I'd rather he go there than crap on a neighbor's lawn, even though I always carry bags to clean up after him. As we're moving through the lot, I noticed a group of 4 guys walking down the street. The one in front was holding a baseball bat, and not in a casual, just came from a game kind of way. It was aggressive, like he meant business. We don't live in the best part of town, literally on the wrong side of the tracks, so my alarm bells started ringing. I kept my cool, though, and went about my business as Bubba scratched at the ground, signaling he was about to do his thing. From a distance, I heard the guy with the bat say something like, "I've got something for this jerk." My brain kicked into overdrive. I've got a small penknife, about 3 inches long, tucked in my right pocket. I slipped it into the cuff of my sleeve, just in case. Then I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and kept my finger hovering over the call button, trying to look as casual as possible while I ran through my options. I could cut through a nearby alley and make a run for it, but I'm 40 now, and I don't move like I did at 20. If they caught up to me in that alley, there'd be no witnesses to whatever they had planned. I could also sprint down the street, but I wasn't sure anyone would even call 911, let alone step in to help. In the end, I decided standing my ground was the best bet. My plan was to let Bubba off the leash. He'd run anyway since he hates conflict, and take out the guy with the bat first with my knife. I called 911, dropped my phone in the dirt since I was on Bluetooth, and hope that taking out the leader would scatter the others. It's not a perfect plan, but it's better than dealing with 3 guys plus 1 with a bat. And before you judge, that bat's only dangerous if he gets a swing in. If I could dodge the first one and close the distance with my knife, I have the upper hand. I wasn't looking for a fight, but when seconds count, the cops are minutes away. I'm not knocking the police, they do what they can, and I respect them. But in that moment, it was on me to hold my own. Plus, I wasn't 100% sure of their intentions. This is real life, not some movie, and with meth and crack floating around out here, you never know what people are on. So there I was, crouched in the weeds, Bubba starting to do his business, and these guys getting closer. I had the knife in my hand, ready to slip the leash off and hit the call button. It took everything I had to keep Bubba calm. He's a handful on a good day, let alone when he senses trouble. Just as the guy with the bat hit the sidewalk, close enough for me to make my move, he saw Bubba and froze. Oh damn, I ain't going near that dog. That thing bites. I let out a huge sigh of relief. One of the other guys came up to me while Bubba was still busy and asked, "Yo, does he bite?" I didn't miss a beat. "Hell yeah, he does," I said. With that, all 4 of them kept walking in the direction they were headed, like nothing happened. I stood there, heart still pounding, watching them go. When we got home, Bubba got extra treats and cuddles, even though he had no clue the role he played. If I'd been out there alone, I've got no doubt things would have gone south. But thanks to my big teddy bear dog, I walk away without a scratch. This happened back in May of 2015 in California, for those who know the area. I graduated college in June 2014 and moved back to my hometown to start a consulting company with my boyfriend. Things were going pretty well. We just wrapped up a contract in the Bay Area, and we're starting a new one about 8 hours south in Torrance. My boyfriend went down first to get things set up, while I stayed behind to tie up loose ends with our last project. The day came for me to join him, so I packed up my car and hit Interstate 5. If you've never driven it, I-5 is a straight shot through nowhere with barely any scenery, just the occasional strip mall. It's so monotonous it's got a reputation for lulling drivers to sleep. I was making good time when I passed a strip mall with a gas station and a fast food joint. My tank was getting low, and I was hungry, so I decided to stop. The food place's parking lot was packed, so I parked across the street at a hotel without thinking much of it. I went in, ate my meal, and headed back to my car. I was well into the hotel parking lot when a pickup truck pulled down the aisle and stopped right in my path with the passenger side facing me. The driver was alone, a clean-cut white guy in his mid-30s, looking super generic like he just walked out of an office. The way he pulled in front of me didn't set off any alarm bells at first. It felt natural, like he just happened to stop there. He rolled down the window and said, "Excuse me, miss, could you tell me where the grocery store in town is?" I shrugged and said, "Sorry, I'm not from here, so I honestly don't know." He nodded and asked, "Oh, okay, where are you from?" I laughed a little and said, "Good question. I'm not really sure, not here though." I wasn't trying to be rude. I moved through so many cities by that point and was on my way to another, so I didn't know how to answer. He chuckled, made a quick joke, and then asked where I was headed. I mentioned I was moving. He was super charismatic, and at this point, I just thought he was flirting. On another day, if I wasn't exhausted and in a relationship, it might have even worked. He went on about how much moving sucks, and I thought, damn straight. He gave a warm laugh, leaned slightly toward the passenger side, and extended his hand to shake mine. "Well, I'm glad I got to meet you." "I'm Scott," he said. The truck was still blocking my path with the passenger side facing me. I took a step forward to shake his hand, but then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Every alarm bell in my head started ringing, just a split second too late. I was in a random hotel parking lot. He'd asked if I knew the area, establishing I was a stranger here. Then he asked where I was from, confirming I was alone. And then where I was going, figuring out I wasn't expected anywhere for hours. The kicker was his handshake. He didn't lean over the seat or make any effort to meet me halfway. His hand was just hovering over the center console, waiting for me to lean into the car to grab it. I'd already started raising my hand when it all clicked. I froze, rocked back to where I was standing, and locked eyes with him. It felt like forever, my brain piecing together the danger, while part of me wondered if I was just being paranoid. His hand was still out, waiting. I lowered mine, my eyes narrowing with suspicion, and said slowly, "Hey, I'm gonna walk away from your car now, okay?" In that instant, the truck peeled out, tires screeching, kicking up gray smoke as he floored it out of the parking lot like he was running from something. It was smart, in a twisted way. I didn't get a license plate or anything to give the cops. In the moment, I felt a wave of relief, but I hadn't fully processed how close I'd come to something bad. I had hours left to drive, which gave me way too much time to replay the whole thing in my head. The truck was slightly lifted. There could have easily been someone else, or even 2 or 3 people, hiding inside. Would he have yanked me into the car? Would I have been knocked out or drugged? My mind kept spinning out these awful scenarios where I'd wake up hours later, and no one would even know where on my drive I'd gone missing, maybe not for a whole day. I still get chills thinking about how close I came to taking his hand and how lucky I was that I didn't let politeness override my instincts. Guys like that count on you not wanting to seem rude, and I almost fell for it. I'm a 19-year-old guy now, but this happened back in 2011 when I was 16, on my first big trip abroad. My high school organized an annual Euro tour, and that year I got to go. It was a 12-day trip with a bunch of teachers and parents as chaperones, including our headmaster. Most of our days were packed with scheduled activities, but we had a few hours each day to explore the cities on our own. This was my first time on a plane, my first time overseas, so I was hyped but also a little naive. We were in Rome, and my friend and I were wandering the streets near our hotel, snapping pics and killing time before we had to meet up with our group of about 15 kids and 4 teachers for pizza at a small restaurant not far away. Fast forward to the restaurant. We're all sitting outside on the sidewalk, chowing down on pizza and chatting. The teachers were inside, right by the door, keeping an eye on us. I decided to pop over to a tiny corner store next to the restaurant to grab a bottle of water. It was so close that some of the other kids were sitting practically at the entrance, so I didn't think to bring anyone with me. As I was leaving the store, this big guy in a dark jacket came out of nowhere and pushed me up against a light post. He was huge, towering over me, and he opened his jacket to kind of shield us from view. He asked me my name, his voice low and intense. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. He asked again, but I just froze, refusing to answer. Thank God one of the girls in our group saw what was happening. She ran over, grabbed me, and yanked me out of his reach. I burst into tears right there, totally overwhelmed. We alerted the teachers, and our headmaster, thinking the guy was probably drunk, shouted at him to get lost. The man disappeared around a corner, and things calmed down for a bit. I was shaken but tried to stay composed, standing against the wall with 6 other kids in front of me, closer to the restaurant entrance. Then, out of nowhere, the same guy came back. He tried to push through the group to get to me again. It caused total chaos. Everyone was yelling, and the adults jumped into action, trying to chase him off. He ran a little further down the street, hopped into a white car, and sped off. We were all rattled but managed to regroup and get escorted back to the hotel, still confused by the whole thing. Later that evening, we had some free time to pick a restaurant in the area with our friends. We usually moved in groups of 5, so we got dressed up and headed out to a place we liked. The earlier incident had kind of faded into the background with all the excitement and activities going on. We were distracted, caught up in the fun of being in Rome. The whole tour group, minus a couple of adults, decided to meet up at a bar later. It's Europe, so the older kids thought it'd be fun to sneak in a few drinks before curfew. Acting a little rebellious. As we got to the bar's entrance, 2 people from our group pulled me inside and told me to sit down. Apparently, someone had spotted the same guy from earlier that day, sitting in that same white car, parked a little further down the dark road. This time, he was with another man. I broke down completely. We were all terrified. We explained what was going on to the bar owners as best we could, and our group decided to head back to the hotel together, constantly checking our surroundings and doing head counts to make sure everyone was accounted for. Luckily, we were leaving for another town a few hours away early the next morning, so we got out of there. This whole experience still haunts me. I have no idea where that guy first saw me, or how he knew I'd be at that restaurant. For all I know, he'd been following me all day, maybe even knew what hotel we were staying at. Coming from South Africa, I had this idea that Europe was some safe, carefree place compared to home. Looking back, I wish I hadn't let my guard down so much. I'm a 25-year-old stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, and I no longer feel safe in my apartment. We moved in almost 3 years ago, and right away, I added a second lock to the door, mainly to keep our daughter, who was 2 at the time, from wandering out. But now I'm pretty sure that lock has been keeping someone else out. A few months back, something strange happened that didn't seem like a big deal at first, but it's been gnawing at me, making me feel paranoid and unsafe. I think someone's been trying to get into our apartment. The first time it happened, my daughter wasn't in school yet, and my son was just a few months old. My partner works odd hours, but he usually texts me when he's on his way home so I can unlock the top lock for him to let himself in with his key. Our daughter, who was 4 then, loves running to the door to greet him when he gets home. That night, though, it wasn't him at the door. I was on the couch, cradling my son, when I heard someone try to open the door. It stopped because it was locked, which happens sometimes. My partner will try the handle before using his key. My daughter heard it too and bolted to the door like usual. But this time, for some reason, she decided to unlock it and open it herself, which she doesn't normally do. I heard the door swing open and then slam shut. I was about to scold her for opening it without me when she came back and said, in her sweet little voice, "It wasn't Daddy." That threw me for a loop. I got freaked out, immediately locked both locks, and asked her if it was one of the neighbors. We know our neighbors pretty well, but she said no, it was just some guy. She didn't understand why I was so worried. She was just being her innocent self. I told my partner about it when he got home, and we sat her down to explain why she can never open the door by herself again. I tried to brush it off as a weird one-time thing, and didn't dwell on it too much. A few weeks later, though, I heard that same sound again, someone trying to open the door but getting stopped by the lock. I did my best to stay calm and not let it get to me. Then one night, around 12:30 a.m., the kids were asleep, and my partner and I were watching late-night TV. We heard the door rattle again, but this time, whoever it was rang the doorbell and gave a light knock. My partner checked the peephole and saw 3 guys standing there. I told him not to open the door. No way. He said they just left, but when I peeked out the window, careful not to be seen, I didn't see anyone walk away. It made me think they might have been hiding in the stairwell, waiting for us to answer. I wanted to call the cops, but I wasn't sure if someone tried the door and rang the bell was enough for them to take seriously, so I didn't. After that, I started feeling more paranoid, like we were being targeted. I know it sounds dramatic, but we've lived here for 3 years, and this stuff only started happening recently. The scariest moment came 2 or 3 weeks ago. My partner was working a late shift, and it was almost 3 a.m. Our daughter, who's nearly 5 now, sometimes has nightmares and runs to our room, climbing down from her loft bed. That night, we heard what we thought was her getting up and running to our door. My partner went to check, but he gave me this weird look. Right then, there was a loud thud at the front door, followed by the sound of someone sprinting down the stairs outside. We realized it wasn't our daughter, it was someone else. He checked the peephole, but no one was there. I looked out the window and didn't see anyone either. That night, I gathered the kids, brought them into our bedroom, locked the door, and shoved something heavy in front of it. I had a full-blown panic attack, so bad I thought I might need a doctor. I ended up crying myself to sleep quietly, so I wouldn't wake the kids. The next morning, we called the landlord, who said she'd try to get someone to patrol the area. Since then, I haven't opened the door for anyone unless I know they're coming over. Things have been quiet until today, which is why I'm sharing this now. I just gotten out of the shower. My daughter was at school, my partner was at work, and my son was in his pack and play. I was drying off when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I wasn't going to answer. Then I heard the handle rattle, like someone was trying to open it. I froze, just so tired of this crap. I threw on a robe, grabbed a knife just in case, and checked the peephole. No one was there. I'm done with this place. I'm looking into moving because I can't deal with feeling unsafe and violated anymore, especially with my kids here. I just needed to get this off my chest, and if anyone's got suggestions, I'd love to hear them. I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone other than Ryan, but I need to get this off my chest. Even typing this makes my hand shake, and it's been over 12 years now. I've spent too many sleepless nights trying to rationalize what happened in that apartment, and I'm done pretending it was all in my head. Back in January 2011, my fraternity brother Ryan and I were looking for a place off campus. We were both 21, juniors at Cal State Long Beach, and frankly, tired of the constant chaos of frat house living. Don't get me wrong, I loved my brothers, but trying to study political science with beer pong tournaments happening down the hall wasn't working anymore. Ryan was in the same boat with his engineering courses, so we decided to get a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Long Beach. The place was actually a steal, about $1,500 a month split between us for a decent 2-bedroom in an older building just a few miles from campus. The landlord seemed eager to rent it, which should have been our first red flag, but we were excited about having our own space, so we signed the lease without hesitation. January 15th, we moved in with the help of some fraternity brothers, and that first night everything seemed fine. Just normal apartment stuff, creaky floors, thin walls, but nothing alarming. The problem started immediately the next day, when I woke up to Ryan yelling from the hallway. The water heater had somehow opened its emergency pressure valve and flooded part of the hallway outside the utility closet. We called maintenance, and some older guy came up, fixed it, and made some comment about how this one's always acting up. I asked if it happened a lot, and he just shrugged and said the previous tenants had complained about it a few times. At the time, I didn't think much of it, just an old building with old pipes, right? About 2 weeks later, I was coming back from a 3-hour lecture. It was around 6 o'clock in the evening, already dark outside since it was winter. As I approached our building, I noticed someone on our second floor balcony waving frantically. It was Ryan, and he looked pissed. When I got upstairs, Ryan was still out there, shivering. He'd been locked out on the balcony for over 6 hours. He told me he just stepped out for a quick cigarette after lunch, and the sliding door had locked behind him. The thing is, our balcony door didn't have an automatic lock. You had to physically flip the latch to lock it, and Ryan swore he hadn't done that. His phone was inside charging, so he couldn't call anyone. He'd been yelling for help, but our apartment faced the back of the building where there wasn't much foot traffic. I remember joking that maybe he was just absent-minded and locked it himself, but he got really serious and said, "Chris, I did not lock that door." I believed him because Ryan isn't the type to make stuff up or be careless like that. After that incident, we started noticing small things. The shower would turn on by itself in the middle of the night. We'd find cabinet doors open in the kitchen that we were sure we'd closed. Sometimes all the faucets would be dripping simultaneously when we got home. We joked about having a ghost roommate, but neither of us really believed in that stuff yet. Then came the night in early February that changed everything for me. I was alone in the apartment working on a paper around midnight. Ryan was staying at his girlfriend's place. I remember feeling unusually cold despite wearing a hoodie, so I cranked up the heat. As I sat at my desk, I suddenly felt this pressure, like the air had become dense and was pushing against me from all sides. The hair on my arms stood up, and I had this overwhelming sense that something was watching me. I tried to shake it off as late-night paranoia, but then my bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, started to move. Not swing open or closed, but bounce like someone was tapping it rhythmically. There was no draft. All the windows were closed. It moved back and forth about an inch each way, steady like a metronome. I called out, "Hello," like an idiot in a horror movie, but obviously no one answered. The bouncing stopped, and I convinced myself it was just the building settling or something. But then I heard, or rather felt, thoughts that weren't mine. It's so hard to explain this part without sounding completely insane. It was like someone whispering directly into my brain, but I couldn't make out the words. Just this sense of malevolent presence communicating something I couldn't understand. The feeling was so intense and alien that I grabbed my laptop and keys and ran out of the apartment. I spent the night in the 24-hour campus library. When Ryan came back the next day, I told him what happened. He was skeptical but admitted he'd been feeling uncomfortable in the apartment too, especially when he was alone. We agreed to stick together more often, but things got much worse in March. Ryan had stepped out onto the balcony again for a smoke, though this time he wedged a shoe in the door. I was at class. He texted me frantically around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, "Come home now." When I got there, Ryan was sitting on the couch, pale and shaking. The balcony door was wide open. The shoe he'd used to prop it had been thrown across the room. But that wasn't what had terrified him. While he was outside, he heard crashes coming from his bedroom. He said he watched through the balcony door as his things started flying around his room. His desk chair flipped over, books flew off shelves, his laptop slammed against the wall, all while no one was in there. I thought he was messing with me until I saw his room. It was completely trashed. Everything was scattered. His mattress was half off the bed frame, posters torn from walls. It looked like someone had ransacked it looking for something, except Ryan had been watching the whole time from outside, and no one had gone in or out. That night, we slept in the living room with all the lights on. Neither of us wanted to admit how scared we were, but we both felt it. Something was in that apartment with us, and it was getting bolder. Sleep became nearly impossible for me after that. I'd lie in bed and hear footsteps approaching from the hallway that would stop right at my door. My doorknob would rattle violently, like someone was trying to get in. Several times I heard this low, guttural growling coming from the corner of my room, not like a dog, deeper and more human, but not quite. When I'd turn on the lights, nothing would be there, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. By April, my grades were tanking. I was sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours a night, if at all. I started crashing at fraternity brothers' places or in the library, making excuses about needing to study late. I couldn't focus in class because I was so exhausted and constantly thinking about what might be happening back at the apartment. One night, when I couldn't find anywhere else to stay, I came back to the apartment around 11 o'clock. Ryan was already asleep in his room. Somehow he could still sleep there, though he admitted to taking sleeping pills. I sat at our kitchen counter trying to study when my MacBook charger, which was plugged into the wall, started moving. Not just shifting slightly, it was writhing on the floor like it was alive. The rubber cord was twisting and curling in on itself like a snake. I filmed it on my phone because I knew no one would believe me, but when I watched the video back later, you could only see the charger lying still on the ground. It was like whatever this thing was couldn't be captured on camera. Another time, a champagne bottle we had on the kitchen counter, left over from a party, slid from one end of the counter to the other right in front of me and Ryan. We both saw it. There was no slope, no water underneath it, nothing that could explain it. It moved smoothly, like it was being pushed by an invisible hand. The final straw came in late April. I was trying to sleep after pulling an all-nighter for a midterm. I was beyond exhausted. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I felt my bed shake, not like an earthquake, more like someone was under my bed pushing up against the mattress. Then my blanket started slowly pulling down toward the foot of the bed. I grabbed it, and there was actual resistance, like someone was playing tug-of-war with me. I shouted for Ryan, and as soon as he opened my door, whatever was happening stopped. But I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. My mental health was completely shot. I told Ryan we needed to leave, and for once, he didn't argue. We talked to the landlord the next day about breaking our lease, making up some excuse about having to move closer to campus. The strangest part was his reaction. He didn't seem surprised or even upset. He just nodded and said, "I understand. No questions about our reasons. No attempt to keep us there." He even returned our full security deposit without inspecting the place, which never happens in California. It was like he knew exactly why we were leaving. We moved out the first week of May, barely 3.5 months after moving in. We never did any research on the building's history. Part of me didn't want to know. I was just relieved to be out of there. 4 months afterward, I had nightmares about that place. Sometimes I still do. In the dreams, I'm back in that apartment, but all the rooms are wrong. Longer than they should be, doors where there weren't any before, and something is always coming down the hallway toward my room, something I can feel but never see. I tried to rationalize what happened: carbon monoxide poisoning, mass hysteria between Ryan and me, stress hallucinations. I've considered it all, but none of those explanations account for everything we experienced. The objects moving, the door locking itself, the voices in my head. Ryan and I don't talk about it much anymore. He transferred to UC San Diego the following semester, and I think part of the reason was to get farther away from Long Beach and those memories. The last time we discussed it, he told me he still sleeps with the lights on sometimes. I haven't been back to that building since we left. I don't know who lives in that apartment now, or if they're experiencing the same things we did. Part of me wants to warn them, but what would I even say? Hey, there's something living in your apartment that isn't human. They think I was crazy. Whatever was in that apartment, it wasn't just passing through. It lived there. It had claimed that space as its own, and we were the intruders. I don't know what it was or what it wanted from us. All I know is that those 4 months changed how I see the world. There are things that exist alongside us that we don't understand and can't explain. Things that can reach out and touch our lives in terrifying ways. I still can't sleep in complete darkness anymore, and I never ever ignore that feeling of being watched, because sometimes you really aren't alone. I've never been the kind of person who believed in ghosts. Sure, I love the good horror movie, but I'd always roll my eyes whenever friends would talk about their so-called paranormal experiences. I was the skeptic in the group, the one who would find logical explanations for every bump in the night. That changed during the summer of 2018, and I still haven't fully processed what happened that day at Victoria Manor. I've been working as a tour guide at the manor for almost 3 years by that point. Victoria Manor is this massive Victorian mansion in Hartford, Connecticut, built in the late 1800s by Edwin Blackwood, some wealthy industrialist who made his fortune in textiles. The place is stunning. 3 stories of intricate woodwork, stained glass windows, and period furniture that makes history buffs drool. It's also supposedly one of the most haunted buildings in New England, which is why our tours were always packed with ghost hunters and thrill seekers. The haunting stories centered around Edwin's wife Martha, who died giving birth to their daughter Elizabeth. The baby only lived for 6 weeks before passing away herself. Edwin was devastated, became a recluse, and eventually died alone in his bedroom in 1912. According to local legend, his spirit never left the house. Tourists would constantly claim they felt cold spots, heard crying, or even glimpsed a figure in Victorian clothing watching them from the top of the grand staircase. I knew all the stories by heart and delivered them with enough theatrical flair to satisfy the paying customers, but I never actually believed any of it. The manor had its quirks. Old houses always do. Floors that creak for no reason, doors that don't quite shut right, weird drafts that seem to come from nowhere. But ghosts? Please. I figure the paranormal activity that supposedly increased between June and mid-July, coinciding with little Elizabeth's brief life, was just people's imaginations running wild after I'd fill their heads with ghost stories. That day in late July started like any other. It was a Tuesday, which meant fewer tourists. Summer was usually our busy season, but for whatever reason, that particular Tuesday was dead. We had only one small tour in the morning and nothing scheduled for the afternoon. My supervisor told me and Jessica, the new guide who'd started just 2 weeks earlier, to use the downtime to clean some of the rooms that needed attention. Jessica was still learning the ropes. She was maybe 22, fresh out of college with a history degree, and way too enthusiastic about Victorian architecture. I liked her, though. She wasn't like some of the other guides who played up the ghost angle to an annoying degree. She seemed genuinely interested in the actual history of the place. "Hey, have you been in the dead room yet?" I asked her around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She raised her eyebrows. "The what?" "Edwin's bedroom, where he died. We call it the dead room." I grinned. "It needs dusting, and I could use some company." Jessica shrugged. "Sure, lead the way." I grabbed our cleaning supplies, and we headed up to the second floor. The manor was eerily quiet that day. Usually there's at least some ambient noise. Other guides talking, visitors shuffling through the hallways, the old radiators clanking. But that day, it felt like the building was holding its breath. Edwin's bedroom, the dead room, was at the end of the main hallway. It was one of my favorite rooms in the house, not because of its morbid history, but because it had been perfectly preserved. The massive 4-poster bed with its dark mahogany frame, the writing desk by the window where Edwin supposedly spent his final years penning letters that were never sent, the Persian rug that still held its rich colors despite being over a century old. I unlocked the velvet rope that blocked off the room from visitors and gestured for Jessica to enter. "Welcome to where the magic happens," I joked, setting down our cleaning supplies. "Or where the death happened, I guess." Jessica walked in slowly, taking everything in. "Wow, it's so intact. Like he just stepped out for a moment." "Yeah, that's what makes this place special." The Blackwood Foundation has done an amazing job preserving everything. I pulled on a pair of cotton gloves and handed a pair to Jessica. "We have to wear these when handling anything. Some of this stuff is irreplaceable." For the next 20 minutes or so, I gave Jessica an unofficial tour of the room, pointing out details tourists don't usually get to see. The hidden compartment in Edwin's desk where we found a stack of unsent letters to his dead wife, the watercolor painting of Martha that hung on the wall facing the bed so it would be the first thing Edwin saw when he woke up, the beautiful crystal cologne bottles on the dresser that still contained traces of Edwin's scent. "You know what's really cool?" I said, walking over to the bedside table. "This picture frame." I pointed to a small silver frame containing a sepia photograph of Martha holding baby Elizabeth. It's actually a scent sachet, Victorian-era air freshener. I carefully picked it up to show her. "See the back? There's a little compartment where they put rose petals or lavender. Edwin apparently kept it filled with roses because they were Martha's favorite. Jessica leaned in, fascinated. That's incredible. Is it still functional? Nah, it's empty now. We don't add anything to it for preservation reasons. I carefully placed it back exactly where it had been. Okay, let's get cleaning. You want to take the dresser and wardrobe? I'll do the bed area and desk. We split up the room and got to work. The cleaning was detail-oriented and tedious, using special cloths and preservation-safe products to remove dust without damaging anything. I was carefully dusting around the bedside table when I heard Jessica talking softly from across the room. Sorry for disturbing your things, Mr. Blackwood. Just doing a bit of cleaning. I glanced over at her. She was carefully moving objects on top of the chest of drawers, dusting underneath them, and replacing them exactly as they were. I smiled. Making friends with the resident ghost? Jessica looked embarrassed. Force of habit. My grandmother taught me to always acknowledge the spirits when you're in their space. Not that I actually believe, and that's when it happened. In the space between us, the empty air in the middle of the room, the smell of roses suddenly materialized. Not a hint, not a whiff, but an overwhelming, suffocating wall of fragrance. It was as if someone had shoved an entire bouquet directly into my face. The scent was so intense, my eyes started watering immediately. I froze. Jessica froze too, the dusting cloth still in her hand. Our eyes met across the room, and I knew instantly she was experiencing the same thing. Do you? I couldn't even finish my sentence. Roses, she whispered, her face pale. Oh my God. The scent wasn't coming from anywhere near the picture frame I had just shown her. It was concentrated in the empty space between us, forming an invisible pillar of fragrance where absolutely nothing and no one stood. My heart started pounding, so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every hair on my body stood on end. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. Is there a window open? Jessica's voice trembled. Maybe someone's gardening. We both knew that was impossible. The windows in this room had been sealed shut decades ago to protect the furnishings, and there weren't any rose gardens nearby. The manor's gardens were on the opposite side of the property. The scent grew even stronger, if that was possible. It wasn't pleasant anymore. It was suffocating, intrusive, deliberate, like someone was trying to communicate through this overwhelming sensory assault. We should go, I managed to say, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of concrete. The cleaning cloth I'd been holding slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor, making barely a sound on the thick carpet. But that tiny noise broke whatever spell had frozen us in place. Jessica backed away toward the door, never taking her eyes off the center of the room where the invisible scent pillar stood. Something's here with us, she whispered. I wanted to tell her she was being ridiculous, that there had to be a logical explanation, but I couldn't form the words because I felt it too. A presence, a consciousness, something watching us with intent. The door to the bedroom, which we'd left wide open, suddenly slammed shut with such force that one of the picture frames on the nearby wall fell to the floor, its glass shattering. That was all it took. We both bolted for the door at the same time, practically tripping over each other. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grab the doorknob. When I finally yanked it open, we spilled out into the hallway like survivors escaping a sinking ship, gasping for air that didn't smell like roses. What the was that? Jessica's voice was almost unrecognizable, high-pitched with panic. I couldn't answer. My brain was desperately trying to find a rational explanation. A hidden scent dispenser activated by motion, some kind of prank played by another staff member, a weird atmospheric phenomenon that concentrated garden scents from miles away. But I knew better. The rose scent hadn't simply filled the room. It had formed in a specific spot, in the space between us, as if someone unseen was standing there. We practically ran down the stairs to the staff room where my supervisor, Marge, was going through attendance records. "What's wrong with you two?" she asked, looking up from her paperwork. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Then she laughed at her own joke. I tried to explain what had happened, but it came out as a jumbled mess. Jessica wasn't any more coherent. Marge's amusement quickly turned to concern. "Sit down, both of you. Drink some water." After we calmed down enough to speak in complete sentences, we told her what had happened. I expected her to laugh it off or tell us we were overreacting to some normal housework. Instead, she got very quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. "It was the anniversary yesterday." "What anniversary?" Jessica asked. "July 30th, Marge said. "The day Martha died giving birth to Elizabeth." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. I hadn't made that connection. "But why roses?" I asked. "And why today, not yesterday?" Marge shrugged. "Martha loved roses. Edwin planted a whole garden of them for her when they got married. And time might not mean the same thing to whatever's left behind." I couldn't believe Marge, practical, no-nonsense Marge, who'd been giving tours for 20 years, was talking like this was a normal occurrence. "Has this happened before?" Jessica asked. "The rose smell?" "Not exactly like you described," Marge admitted. "We've had visitors claim they smelled roses in different parts of the house over the years. One of our overnight security guards quit last year because he said he kept smelling roses following him through the hallways." I shook my head. "Why didn't you ever tell me this? You never seemed interested in the ghost stories, Ellie. You always made it clear you thought it was all nonsense." She was right. I'd always been vocal about my skepticism. We finished out the day on shaky legs, both jumping at every creak and shadow. Jessica and I avoided talking about what happened, as if putting it into words might somehow make it more real. When my shift ended, I practically ran to my car. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that moment in the dead room, the way the scent had appeared from nowhere, concentrated in empty space, the absolute certainty I felt that we weren't alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined an invisible figure standing there, watching us, trying to communicate in the only way it could. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. On the third day, I drove to Victoria Manor, not for my shift, but to hand in my resignation. I couldn't set foot in that building again. Jessica quit too, I later heard. It's been over 4 years since that day, and I still can't handle the smell of roses. My boyfriend brought me a bouquet for Valentine's Day last year, and I had a full-blown panic attack. He thought I was allergic. I didn't correct him. It's easier than trying to explain what really happened. I don't doubt anymore. I don't roll my eyes when people talk about ghostly encounters or paranormal experiences. I know there are things in this world we can't explain, things that exist just beyond the edge of what we can understand. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder about Edwin and Martha Blackwood. Was it her trying to reach out from whatever comes after this life? Was it him, still wandering the halls of the home he shared with his beloved wife? Or was it something else entirely, something that just wears the scent of roses like a disguise? I don't know. I don't want to know. All I know is that I'll never set foot in Victoria Manor again. And if you ever visit and find yourself in the dead room, in Edwin's perfectly preserved bedroom, and you happen to catch the faintest whiff of roses, my advice is to get out immediately. Because whatever is there, whatever hangs in that space between worlds, it knows you're there, and it wants you to know it's there too. I've been hesitant to talk about this for a long time. It happened about 7 years ago when I was 14, but the memory is still so vivid it could have been yesterday. My family is from San Lorenzo, a small town in the Philippines where everyone pretty much knows everyone else's business. I was visiting my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt, at her old house on the outskirts of town. Looking back, I should have known something wasn't right from the moment we arrived. The house itself wasn't particularly scary during daylight hours, just an old Filipino home built in that traditional style with lots of wood and a metal roof, but something about it just felt off. My mom had mentioned casually that this was where my grandfather had died of a heart attack years before I was born. I guess she thought I was old enough to handle that information, but it planted a seed in my mind that I couldn't shake. When we got there, my great-aunt welcomed us warmly enough. She was in her 70s, always wearing those floral house dresses and moving slowly with a cane. The inside of the house was what really started making me uncomfortable. Every wall, and I mean every wall, had these framed photographs of deceased relatives. Not just recent ones either. There were faded sepia photos from what looked like the early 1900s, black and white portraits from mid-century, and more recent color photos of relatives who had passed. My great aunt had this thing about keeping the memory of the dead alive. She would point to each photo and tell me their name, how they died, and some random fact about them. That's your great-great-uncle Ramon. Died of tuberculosis in 1938. He could play the guitar beautifully. Or, that's your second cousin Marina. She drowned in 1976. She made the best bibinka in the province. After a while, it felt like the eyes in those photographs were following me. I kept catching glimpses of them in my peripheral vision as I moved through the house. My mom seemed totally unbothered by it all. This was normal to her, the Filipino way of honoring ancestors. But for a 14-year-old kid who grew up in a more modern household, it was seriously creepy. Our sleeping arrangements didn't help either. I was given a thin mattress on the floor of what my great-aunt called the family room, which basically meant another room full of dead people's photos and religious statues. There must have been at least 15 different saints staring down at me from the top of a massive wooden dresser. St. Francis, St. Anthony, the Virgin Mary, and so many others I didn't recognize, all with those intense painted-on eyes. My mom and grandmother were sleeping in the main bedroom with my great-aunt, while I was alone in this room with just a small lamp on a side table. I remember lying there, unable to sleep, listening to the unfamiliar night sounds of rural Philippines, geckos chirping on the walls, the occasional dog barking in the distance, and the relentless buzzing of insects outside. I must have drifted off eventually because I woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning needing to pee badly. The house was dead silent except for the faint snoring coming from the other room. Now, I should mention that my great-aunt's house had indoor plumbing, but the bathroom was in this weird spot, kind of like a mini addition built onto the side of the house. You had to go through this short hallway past the kitchen to get there. When I got up, my grandmother must have heard me moving around. She came out and whispered that I should just use the Arenola, this ceramic chamber pot they kept under the bed for nighttime use. I'd seen it earlier, and the thought of peeing in a pot in a room with 3 elderly women was not happening. I whispered back that I'd rather use the actual bathroom. She looked concerned but nodded and went back to bed. So there I was, barefoot in shorts and a t-shirt, making my way through the dark house with just the dim light of the moon coming through the windows. I didn't want to turn on lights and wake everyone up completely. I knew my way well enough, down the short hallway, past the kitchen, and then to the bathroom door. The bathroom door was at the end of this mini hallway, but there was also a side door right next to it that led outside to the front yard. This side door was one of those split ones. The top and bottom could open separately. For some reason, the top half was open, letting in the night air and moonlight. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe someone had opened it earlier to let the bathroom air out or something. I glanced outside through the open half door as I approached the bathroom, and that's when I saw it. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. There, next to this big mango tree in the front yard, was a woman. But not a normal woman. She was wearing this long white dress that seemed to glow in the moonlight, and her hair was impossibly long, reaching past her knees. She wasn't standing on the ground. She was floating, maybe a foot above it. Her face was turned away from me, thank God, but something about the way she was positioned made it clear she was aware of the house, aware of me. I froze completely. My whole body went cold, and I could feel my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. For what felt like forever, I just stood there, unable to move, unable to even blink. Then, and this is what still haunts me, she started to turn. Slowly, so slowly, she began rotating in my direction. And as she turned, she also started drifting toward the house, toward me. I don't know how I managed to move, but suddenly I found myself lunging for the bathroom door. I practically fell inside, not even fully closing the door behind me, because I was afraid of making noise. I left it slightly ajar, thinking crazily that I needed an escape route if she came in after me. The bathroom was tiny, just a toilet, a small sink, and a shower area with a bucket and dipper, the traditional Filipino way of bathing. There was a small window high on the wall, but it was too small for me to fit through if I needed to escape. The whole time I was in there, I kept imagining her floating up to the half-open side door, her face finally turning fully toward me, pushing open the bathroom door with some invisible force. I peed as quickly as I could, not even caring about the noise. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull my shorts back up. I didn't wash my hands or flush. I wasn't spending one extra second in that bathroom. When I finished, I turned off the bathroom light and peered through the crack in the door. The hallway was still dark, and I couldn't see outside through the half door anymore from that angle. I took a deep breath and ran. I just sprinted out of that bathroom, down a mini hallway, through the kitchen, and back to my mattress. I didn't look back once. I was too terrified of what I might see. I dove under my thin blanket and curled up into a ball, my back against the wall, facing the room. Now all those saints on the dresser that had creeped me out earlier seemed like my only protection. I stared at them, silently begging them to keep me safe. Every sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind outside, even my own breathing sounded alien and threatening. I kept expecting to see her drift through the doorway into the family room any moment. My eyes kept playing tricks on me in the darkness. The curtains moving slightly from the breeze looked like flowing white fabric. The shadow of a coat hanging on the door resembled a human figure. I was too scared to close my eyes, certain that the moment I did, she would appear before me. The worst part was not knowing who or what she was. In Filipino culture, we have all these different types of supernatural beings. Was she a white lady, a common Filipino ghost, a manguculum, witch, or maybe even a Tiyanak, demon that takes the form of a child? Whatever she was, she didn't feel human. There was something fundamentally wrong about the way she moved, the way she floated. As time crept by, the sky outside slowly began to lighten. I watched the darkness gradually recede, never taking my eyes off the doorway. When the first rays of sunlight finally filtered through the windows, I felt the tension in my body ease just slightly. Everyone knows spirits are strongest at night, especially around 3 or 4 in the morning, the complete opposite of noon when the sun is highest. When my mom and grandmother finally woke up around 6 o'clock, I was still wide awake, huddled against the wall. My mom immediately noticed something was wrong. Apparently, I looked terrible, pale, and with dark circles under my eyes. When I tried to tell her what happened, my voice was shaking so badly I could hardly get the words out. I'll never forget her reaction. Instead of dismissing it or telling me it was just my imagination, she exchanged this quick, knowing look with my grandmother. They didn't seem surprised. My grandmother sat next to me and asked exactly what I'd seen. When I described the floating woman in white with the long black hair, she nodded as if I'd confirmed something she already knew. "That's why we wanted you to use the Aranola," she said quietly. "The yard isn't safe at night." That's when my great-aunt shuffled into the room and asked what was happening. My grandmother explained in rapid Tagalog, too fast for my limited understanding, but I caught a few words: multo, ghost, and babaya sa puno, woman by the tree. My great-aunt's face changed, her usual friendly expression hardening into something more serious. She came over to me and took my hands in hers. Her skin felt like paper, thin and dry. "Many have seen her," she said simply. "She doesn't come inside. She can't. The saints protect us." I wanted to ask more questions. Who was she? Why was she there? Had she been there when my grandfather died? But something in their expression stopped me. This wasn't something they wanted to discuss further. It was just a fact of life for them, like the weather or the roosters crowing at dawn. We left later that morning, much to my relief. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, growing smaller in the distance. In the daylight, it looked so ordinary, just an old Filipino home with a metal roof and a mango tree in the yard. No one would ever guess what lurked there after dark. I've never stayed at my great-aunt's house again. When family gatherings happen there, I make excuses to leave before sunset. My relatives don't question it. They understand. Sometimes I catch my grandmother watching me with this sad, knowing look in her eyes. I think she feels guilty for exposing me to whatever presence inhabits that place. It's been 7 years, but I still have nightmares about that woman by the tree. In the dreams, she always manages to turn completely around, but I always wake up just before I see her face. Maybe that's a mercy. Some things, once seen, can never be unseen. The logical part of my mind is trying to explain it away, a trick of the moonlight. My imagination heightened by all those photos of dead relatives, the stories of my grandfather dying in that house. But deep down, I know what I saw was real. Whatever was floating by that mango tree that night wasn't human, and it was aware of me. I've researched Filipino folklore extensively since then, trying to understand what I encountered. The closest match seems to be a white lady, the spirit of a woman who died tragically and can't move on. But none of the descriptions quite match what I saw. The way she floated, the unnatural length of her hair, the sense of ancient malevolence that radiated from her. It was something older and darker than the typical ghost stories. To this day, I can't look at mango trees without feeling a chill run down my spine. I can't sleep in unfamiliar houses without checking all the doors and windows twice. And I absolutely refuse to look outside any window between 3 and 5 in the morning. Some things follow you even when you've put thousands of miles between yourself and them. Some memories never fade, no matter how much you wish they would. I don't know who or what that woman by the tree was, but sometimes, in that space between waking and sleeping, I swear I can feel her still watching me, waiting for me to look outside at night just one more time. I've never shared this with anyone outside my immediate family, but I think I'm finally ready to talk about what happened to us when I was 12. Maybe typing this out will help me process it, or maybe someone here has had similar experiences and can tell me I'm not crazy, because even after all these years, I still question what really happened in that house in Melbourne. My parents had recently separated, and my mom moved us to this suburban house that seemed perfectly normal on the outside. Just me, my mom, my older brother Jake, and my younger sister Emma. The house wasn't anything special. 3 bedrooms, a decent backyard, and a kitchen that had probably been renovated sometime in the early 2000s. Nothing about it screamed haunted or stay away. It was just a house. Or so we thought. For the first year and a half, everything was completely normal. We were just trying to get used to our new life, new school, new routines. I remember being more concerned about making friends and dealing with my parents' divorce than anything supernatural. Looking back now, I think that's why none of us noticed anything at first. We were all wrapped up in our own stuff, But then things started happening. Small things at first, so small that we dismissed them. For me, it wasn't too bad. I'd sometimes be home alone after school, waiting for Mom to get back from work, when I'd hear distinct footsteps coming from her bedroom. The first few times, I thought maybe Jake had come home early or Emma had gotten a ride from a friend's parent. Hello. I'd call out, but no one would answer. I'd check every room in the house, my heart racing, only to find it completely empty. The footsteps sounded so real, heavy enough to make the floorboards creak in that particular way that you just can't mistake for anything else. They weren't random creaks that houses sometimes make. These were deliberate steps, like someone pacing back and forth. I remember one night I had my friend Liam over for a sleepover. We were playing video games in my room, pretty late, probably around 11 at night. Everyone else was asleep. Liam paused the game suddenly and asked, "Who's that?" He was looking toward my doorway. I turned and saw this. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It wasn't a full apparition like you see in movies. It was more like a wispy, human-shaped collection of light or mist, just hovering there for a second before it disappeared. I felt cold all over, but tried to brush it off. Probably just my eyes playing tricks on me, I said, trying to sound calm. But Liam looked really freaked out. Dude, I saw it too. Like a person made of smoke. We both tried to laugh it off, but we ended up staying awake nearly all night, too scared to sleep. The weirdest part was that Liam never wanted to stay over again after that. He always invited me to his place instead. The last week before we moved out was when things really intensified for me. I'd be trying to fall asleep when I'd hear the moving boxes we had stacked in the living room sliding across the floor and crashing into each other. The sounds were unmistakable. Cardboard scraping against carpet, the hollow thump of empty boxes falling over, the rustling of packing tape. The first night it happened, I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't make myself get up to check. I just lay there, my blanket pulled up to my chin, my whole body rigid. The sounds went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, when I finally gathered my courage and turned over in bed, everything stopped instantly, like whatever was making the noise knew I was about to investigate. In the morning, I rushed to the living room expecting to see boxes scattered everywhere, but they were stacked exactly as we'd left them. This happened 3 nights in a row. By the 3rd night, I was sleeping with my headphones on, trying to drown out the sounds. My mom had it much worse. She started mentioning weird occurrences about a year after we moved in. There was this painting in her room, nothing special, just a landscape she'd picked up at a garage sale. It kept falling off the wall. Now that might not sound like much, but it wasn't just that it fell, it was how it fell. It doesn't just crash to the ground like you'd expect. She told us one morning over breakfast, dark circles under her eyes. It falls, but then lands perfectly upright against the wall every single time. I've checked the hook, I've checked the frame. There's no reason for it to fall, and definitely no way it should land standing up like that. After the 5th or 6th time, she took the painting down and put it in the garage. That night, she woke up to the sound of all her coat hangers flying out of her closet at once. She said it sounded like someone had swept their arm across the rail and knocked them all to the floor. When she turned on the light, hangers were scattered all over her bedroom floor. But the thing that scared Mom the most was the feeling of someone sitting on her bed. She'd be half asleep and feel the mattress depressed beside her, like someone was sitting down. She'd feel the blanket tug slightly. The first few times, she thought it was Emma coming in after a bad dream. She'd reach out, still groggy, saying, "What's wrong, sweetie?" But no one was there. After a while, she started sleeping with her back against the wall, so nothing could sit behind her. She also said she constantly felt like someone was walking right behind her in the hallway. Not just a vague feeling, but the distinct sensation of someone following so closely that she could feel their breath on the back of her neck. She'd whirl around, heart pounding, only to find empty space. It got to the point where she'd press herself against the wall when walking down the hallway, just to make sure nothing could get behind her. My brother Jake's room was closest to the kitchen, and he'd hear pots and pans moving around at about 5 o'clock in the morning almost every day. At first, he assumed it was Mom getting an early start on breakfast, but when he'd go to check, the kitchen would be empty and everything would be exactly where it had been the night before. One weekend, Mom took Emma shopping, and I was at a friend's house. Jake was home alone, playing games on his computer with headphones on. He said he felt a sudden chill in the room, so intense that he could see his breath. Then the hallway light turned on. He could see the glow under his door, and he watched as a shadow passed across that sliver of light. He ripped his headphones off and called out, thinking one of us had come home early. Silence. He searched every room in the house and found all the doors and windows locked from the inside. After that, Jake started spending most nights at friend houses. When he did sleep at home, he'd push his dresser in front of his door. But it was my little sister Emma, only 8 at the time, who had the worst experiences. One night, Mom told Emma to brush her teeth in the en-suite bathroom connected to Mom's bedroom because her other bathroom was being repainted. Emma went in, and less than a minute later, she came running out, toothbrush still in hand, toothpaste foaming at her mouth. "There's someone sitting on your bed," she told Mom, her voice shaking. Mom went to check and found the bedroom empty, but Emma refused to go back in there. She spat her toothpaste into the kitchen sink and wouldn't go near Mom's room for days afterward. Then Emma started having trouble sleeping. She'd come into my room in the middle of the night, shaking me awake, tears streaming down her face. "There's a man in my doorway," she'd whisper. A really tall black man. At first, we thought she was just having nightmares, but it kept happening, and her descriptions were always consistent. She said it wasn't like a normal person. It was unnaturally tall, its head almost touching the top of the door frame, and completely black, not like skin, but like it was made of darkness. Sometimes it would just stand there, watching her. Other times, she said it would actually come into her room and stand at the foot of her bed. One morning over breakfast, Emma was unusually quiet. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. When Mom asked what was wrong, Emma just pushed her cereal bowl away and said, "It sat on my bed last night. It sat there for a long time, watching me. I pretended to be asleep, but I could feel it looking at me." That was when Mom decided we needed to move. We'd been planning to eventually anyway. The house was only temporary after the divorce, but she started actively looking that day. It took about 3 months to find a new place and get everything sorted, and those were the longest 3 months of my life. When we finally moved out, we were all relieved. On our last day in the house, I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of being watched as I carried the last of my boxes to the car. The house felt different somehow, like it knew we were leaving and wasn't happy about it. About a week after we moved, Mom called the real estate agent just out of curiosity. She asked if there had been any reports of strange occurrences in the house from previous tenants. The agent hesitated for a moment before saying, No reports at all, but something in his voice didn't sound right. He was too quick to change the subject, asking about how we were settling into the new place. None of us believed him. There's no way we all experienced those things without there being something seriously wrong with that house. Sometimes I wonder about the people who moved in after us. If they're experiencing the same things, or if whatever was there attached itself to us somehow. It's been years now, but I still sometimes jerk awake in the middle of the night, convinced I've heard those footsteps again. Emma still refuses to sleep with her door open. Jake still pushes furniture in front of his bedroom door when he's home alone, and Mom still won't hang paintings in her bedroom. I don't know what was in that house. I don't know if it was a ghost or something else entirely. All I know is that it was real. It was there. And sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I swear I can still feel it watching me. I've tried researching the history of the house since then, but haven't found anything significant. No recorded deaths, no tragic events. Just an ordinary suburban home that for some reason wasn't ordinary at all. The scariest part, I think, about how many other houses might be just like it. How many other families are lying awake right now, listening to footsteps that shouldn't be there, feeling eyes on them in the dark. Sometimes I drive past our old house, just to see who lives there now. I thought about knocking on the door, warning them, but what would I say? Excuse me, but there might be a tall black figure watching you sleep tonight. They probably wouldn't believe me anyway. I'm not sure I would have believed it either if someone had warned us before we moved in. Some things you just have to experience to believe. And trust me, you don't want to experience this. I still can't believe I'm finally writing this down. For years, I've kept quiet about what happened in that house, mostly because I was afraid people would think I was making it up or losing my mind. But after talking with my therapist about it, she suggested that sharing might help me process everything. So here goes. Back in 2015, my family moved into what seemed like a perfectly normal house on the outskirts of Melbourne. It wasn't fancy or anything, just a modest 2-story place with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room. Nothing special, nothing that would make you look twice. My parents were excited because they'd finally saved enough for a down payment after renting for years. I was 19 then, still living at home while studying at uni, and my little sister Emily was just 5. The first year was completely normal. I remember thinking how lucky we were to find a decent place we could afford. Mom had decorated it with all our family photos, and Dad had fixed up the garden out back. Emily had settled into her new school and made friends in the neighborhood. I had a part-time job at a cafe between classes and was enjoying my first year of university. Everything seemed perfect. It was almost exactly a year after we moved in when the first incident happened. I remember it was a Tuesday evening in July, middle of winter in Australia, so it was already dark outside by 6 p.m. I was heading upstairs to my room after dinner to study for an exam I had coming up. I was about halfway up the stairs, right at that middle landing where they turn, when I heard it. Hey. It was a man's voice, low, raspy, just above a whisper. It sounded like it came from right behind my left ear. I froze mid-step, my blood running cold. The voice was so clear, so distinct, but also somehow wrong. It didn't sound like my dad, who was the only other male in the house. Dad has a booming voice that carries through walls. This was nothing like that. This was intimate, like someone whispering a secret directly into my ear. I spun around, nearly losing my balance on the stairs. There was nobody there. Dad, I called out, but I could hear him and Mom chatting in the kitchen downstairs, their voices distant but clearly coming from the other end of the house. Emily was watching TV in the living room. I could hear the cartoon sounds. I stood there for a solid minute, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself I had imagined it, that maybe it was just the house settling or the wind outside. Old houses make weird noises, right? Except our house wasn't old at all. It had been built in the 90s. I eventually convinced myself it was nothing and continued to my room, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door. I didn't tell anyone about it. What was I going to say? I heard a voice on the stairs. It seemed silly in the light of day. About a week later, I was in the exact same spot on the stairs when it happened again. This time, it wasn't a word. It was the sound of someone coughing, followed by a low, childlike giggle. Again, it sounded like it was right beside my ear, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. The giggle had this weird quality to it, not like Emily's laugh at all. It was mischievous, malicious even. This time, I ran the rest of the way up the stairs and slammed my bedroom door shut. I sat on my bed, trying to calm my breathing. I considered telling Mom, but I knew she'd just say I was being dramatic. Dad would probably suggest it was the neighbors or something from outside. So I kept it to myself again. For a while after that, things were quiet. Occasionally, I'd feel like someone was watching me when I was alone in my room, or I'd get this sudden chill walking through certain parts of the house, especially near that middle landing on the stairs. But there were no more voices, no more inexplicable sounds. I started to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. Fast forward 3 years to 2018. I was 22 by then, in my final year of university. Emily had just turned 8. We'd been living in the house for 4 years, and except for those 2 incidents on the stairs during that first year, everything had been normal. It was a Sunday afternoon in March. Mom and I were in the kitchen preparing lunch while Dad was in the backyard mowing the lawn. Emily had gone upstairs to Mom's bedroom to get something. I don't even remember what. Suddenly, the most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard in my life ripped through the house. It was Emily. Mom dropped the knife she was using to cut vegetables, and we both sprinted up the stairs. The scream was continuing, raw and terrified. We found Emily standing frozen in Mom and Dad's room, staring at the open bathroom door. She was shaking violently, tears streaming down her face, her little body rigid with fear. Her face was drained of all color. "Emily, what happened?" Mom grabbed her by the shoulders, trying to get her to focus. Emily couldn't tear her eyes away from the bathroom door. "The shadow man," she whispered between sobs. The shadow man with red eyes was staring at me. Mom looked at the bathroom. There was nothing there, just the empty bathroom with its white tiles and shower curtain. "Honey, there's no one there," Mom said gently, pulling Emily into a hug. But Emily was inconsolable. He was there. He was right there in the doorway. He was looking at me, and he had red eyes. I felt that same cold dread I'd experienced on the stairs years earlier wash over me. I walked cautiously toward the bathroom, half expecting to see someone there. The bathroom was empty, but the air inside felt heavy, wrong somehow, like the atmosphere itself was thicker, harder to breathe. Dad came running upstairs after hearing all the commotion. Emily refused to go back to Mom and Dad's room for weeks afterward. She wouldn't even walk past their door. She started having nightmares almost every night, always about a shadow man watching her. That was when things began to escalate. About a month after Emily's encounter, I started feeling sick. At first, it was just fatigue. I figured I was just run down from studying for finals. But then it got worse. I became pale and weak, barely able to get out of bed. I started having these intense stomach pains that would come and go. One morning, I went to use the bathroom, the same upstairs bathroom where Emily had seen the shadow man. I remember feeling dizzy as soon as I stepped inside. The air felt oppressive, like it was pushing down on me from all sides. I managed to use the toilet, but as I was washing my hands, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I doubled over. What happened next is still difficult to talk about. I started vomiting, but it wasn't normal vomit. It was blood, bright red blood. I remember staring down at the sink in horror as it streamed from my mouth. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was weak and no one heard me. Somehow, I managed to clean myself up. I was terrified, but also strangely detached, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I can't explain why. It makes no sense to me now. It was like something was preventing me from seeking help, like my mind wasn't entirely my own. For the next 3 days, I kept getting worse. Every time I used that bathroom, I'd end up vomiting blood afterward. I would clean up the evidence and then collapse in my room. I was growing weaker by the hour, but some inexplicable force kept me from telling my family. On the 3rd day, Mom came looking for me because I hadn't come down for dinner. She found me in the upstairs bathroom, slumped against the sink, which was covered in blood. My clothes were soaked in it. I barely remember her screaming for Dad or being carried to the car. The next clear memory I have is waking up in the hospital with tubes and wires connected to my body. The doctors were baffled. They diagnosed me with a severe blood infection that had caused internal bleeding, but they couldn't determine the source of the infection. They told my parents that if they brought me in even a few hours later, I might not have survived. While I was recovering in the hospital, I finally told Mom about the voices I'd heard on the stairs years before. I expected her to dismiss it, but instead, she went very quiet. "I've heard things too," she finally admitted. Footsteps when no one's there, whispering in the night. But I thought it was just my imagination. When I returned home 2 weeks later, I couldn't bring myself to use that bathroom. I started using the downstairs toilet exclusively, even though it meant going up and down the stairs multiple times a day. While I was still recovering, everyone in our family started avoiding that bathroom too. We never really talked about why, but we all felt it. Whenever any of us had to use it, we'd come out feeling drained and depressed. Dad, who had always been skeptical about anything paranormal, started complaining about feeling watched when he showered. Mom said she would get overwhelming feelings of sadness in there for no reason. Emily refused to go near it at all. She started having night terrors again, waking up screaming about the shadow man standing at the foot of her bed. Strange things started happening throughout the house. Objects would disappear and reappear in different places. We'd hear banging on the walls at night. The temperature in certain parts of the house would drop suddenly, creating cold spots that would move around. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to find all the kitchen cabinets and drawers wide open. I knew they'd been closed when we went to bed. No one else had been up during the night. The atmosphere in the house changed. What had once felt like a warm family home now felt oppressive and threatening. We all became irritable and on edge, snapping at each other over nothing. Looking back, it's like something was feeding on our negative energy, making everything worse. I moved out a year later for a job in Sydney, and I've never been so relieved to leave a place behind. My family stayed for another year before they finally sold the house and moved to Brisbane. They never told the new owners about our experiences. I sometimes feel guilty about that, but what would they have said? By the way, there might be a malevolent entity living in your bathroom. I'm 27 now, and I still get anxious whenever I visit my family, even though they live in a completely different house. Those experiences left a mark on all of us. Emily, who's 13 now, still sleeps with a light on. Mom jumps at unexpected noises. Dad, who used to laugh at ghost stories, won't watch horror movies anymore. As for me, I've had multiple tests and scans over the years, but doctors have never found any reason why I should have developed that life-threatening blood infection. Physically, I'm completely healthy now, but mentally, I still have nightmares about that bathroom, about the heaviness in the air, the feeling of something draining the life out of me, about waking up to find myself covered in blood with no memory of how it happened. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear that same whispery voice saying, "Hey," right next to my ear. And sometimes, just for a split second before I turn on the light in my bathroom, I think I see a dark figure with glowing red eyes watching me from the corner. I don't know what was in that house in Melbourne. I don't know if it was a ghost or a demon or something else entirely. But I know it was real, and I know it nearly killed me. I still haven't found any explanation for what happened to us there. Maybe I never will. But writing this down, sharing it with people who might understand or have experienced something similar, it helps somehow. It makes it feel less like a nightmare and more like something I can eventually come to terms with. All I know for sure is that there was something evil in that house, something that didn't want us there, something that's still with me in a way. Even though I'm hundreds of kilometers away now, and I'll never set foot in that house again. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or supernatural stuff. I'm a pretty practical person. I work in accounting, I clip coupons on Sundays, and I generally think there's a logical explanation for most things. That's why what happened in my home last month has completely shaken me to my core. I still can't explain it, and it's making me question everything I thought I knew about reality. We've lived in Oakwood Hills for almost 7 years now. It's your typical suburban neighborhood. Well-kept lawns, neighbors who wave but don't get too involved in your business, kids riding bikes in the cul-de-sac. Our house isn't anything special, just a standard 3-bedroom with a decent backyard for our dog Baxter. We've never had any weird experiences here. No strange noises, no unexplained feelings, nothing that would make us think twice about our home being completely normal. That all changed on a Tuesday evening last month. I remember it was around 5:30 in the afternoon. My husband Mark was working late, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, just a simple pasta dish with a salad. Tyler, my 13-year-old son, was upstairs finishing his homework before dinner. Baxter was asleep in his bed in the corner of the kitchen, occasionally snoring in that cute way dogs do. Our kitchen has this big window that looks out onto our driveway, which is covered with those decorative pebbles that make a loud crunching noise whenever anyone walks or drives on them. I was at the counter chopping bell peppers when I got this weird feeling. You know that sensation when you feel like someone's watching you? It just came over me suddenly. I glanced up at the window, and that's when I saw it for the first time. A figure, kind of shadowy but definitely person-shaped, seemed to be walking up our driveway toward the house. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark silhouette against the early evening light. I blinked, and it was gone. Just vanished. That was weird. I remember saying out loud to myself. Baxter didn't even stir, which was the first red flag. He goes absolutely ballistic when anyone comes up our driveway. He's not a big dog, just a terrier mix, but he thinks he's a Doberman when it comes to protecting our territory. In the pebbles, there was no crunching sound, no car door, no footsteps, nothing. I figured my eyes were playing tricks on me. I've been staring at spreadsheets all day at work, and sometimes your brain just fills in gaps with random stuff when you're tired. So I went back to chopping vegetables. Not even 30 seconds later, that feeling returned, stronger this time. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt goosebumps spreading down my arms. I looked up again, and there it was, closer now, maybe halfway up the driveway. The figure was more distinct this time, definitely human-shaped, with what looked like arms hanging at its sides. Still no features I could make out, just this dark shape against the fading daylight. I dropped the knife on the cutting board and moved closer to the window. "Hello," I called out, even though the window was closed and whoever it was probably couldn't hear me. But as soon as I pressed my face against the glass to get a better look, it disappeared again. This time I was genuinely confused. I walked to the front door and opened it, looking around our front yard and driveway. Nothing. Not a single person in sight. Our neighborhood was quiet as usual, just Mrs. Peterson walking her poodle down at the end of the street. I closed the door and locked it, which I normally don't do when we're home during daylight hours. I felt silly doing it, but something about the situation just felt off. "You're being ridiculous, Sarah," I told myself as I went back to the kitchen. Baxter was still completely zonked out in his bed. I picked up the knife again and tried to focus on dinner prep, but I kept glancing up at the window every few seconds. And then it happened again. The same figure, now at the edge of our driveway closest to the house, just standing there. This time, I could almost make out the shape of a head, shoulders, a torso. It wasn't moving, just standing there as if watching our house, watching me. I froze, knife in hand, staring at it. "This isn't happening," I whispered to myself. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, it was still there. It seemed to be getting more solid, more real with each appearance. I grabbed my phone from the counter, thinking I'd take a picture or maybe call Mark, but I couldn't decide what to do first. When I looked back up, it was gone again. My hands were shaking as I set my phone down. Our motion-activated security camera faces the driveway. We installed it after a few packages went missing last year. It should have been recording if someone was actually there. I made a mental note to check the footage later, sure that it would show nothing and confirm I was just seeing things. I tried to shake it off and continue with dinner, but I couldn't stop that feeling of being watched. I kept my eyes firmly on the cutting board, afraid to look up again. But eventually, that creeping sensation on the back of my neck forced my gaze to the window. This time, my heart nearly stopped. The figure was right outside the window, so close I should have been able to see a face, but there were no features, just a dark silhouette like a person-shaped void. And yet, somehow, I knew it was looking directly at me. I let out a small scream and jumped backward, bumping into the island behind me. The figure disappeared instantly. Baxter finally woke up, looking around confused, but not barking or growling. "Mom, everything okay?" Tyler's voice made me jump again as he came into the kitchen. I hadn't even heard him coming down the stairs. "Yeah, I thought I saw something outside," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to freak him out over what was probably nothing. Tyler walked over to me, giving me a concerned look. "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving," he started to say, but mid-sentence, his eyes went wide and he physically recoiled, stumbling backward a few steps. His face went pale. "Tyler, what's wrong?" I asked, although I already knew. He was staring out the window, his mouth open. "Mom, there was someone right outside the window just now. Like, right there, staring in." My blood ran cold. "You saw it too?" I whispered. Tyler nodded, looking genuinely scared now. In all his 13 years, I've rarely seen that look on his face. Tyler's always been the composed one, the kid who doesn't flinch at horror movies and rolls his eyes when his friends get spooked at sleepovers. But now he looked frightened in a way I'd never seen before. "It was like a person, but not really," he said, his voice unsteady. "It was just there, and then it was gone." I put my arm around him, both to comfort him and to steady myself. "I've been seeing it for the past few minutes. I thought I was imagining things." "What is it?" he asked me, as if I would have the answer. "I don't know," I admitted. But the security camera should have picked it up if there was really someone there. We both stood there for a moment, staring out the window, but nothing appeared. Baxter had gotten up from his bed and was now sniffing around the kitchen, but still showing no signs of alarm. "Let's check the camera feed," Tyler suggested, already pulling out his phone. He's more tech-savvy than I am, so he's the one who set up our security system app. He pulled up the live feed of our driveway, which showed absolutely nothing unusual. Then he scrolled back through the recorded clips from the last 30 minutes. Nothing. No movement detected. No recordings of anyone coming up our driveway. Just an empty driveway with shadows lengthening as the sun got lower. Maybe it was just a reflection or something, I suggested weakly, not believing it myself. Tyler shook his head. "Mom, that wasn't a reflection. I saw someone. It looked like they were looking right at us." We stood there in silence for a moment, both of us periodically glancing at the window. I felt like I should call Mark or maybe even the police, but what would I say? We keep seeing a figure that disappears when we look at it directly, but our dog isn't reacting, and the security camera isn't picking it up. They think we were crazy. I tried to be rational. Maybe it was just someone walking by on the sidewalk, and the angle made it look like they were in our driveway. "But where did they go so fast?" Tyler asked. "And why didn't Baxter bark?" Good questions, ones I didn't have answers for. I decided to continue making dinner, hoping that the normal activity would help calm both of our nerves. Tyler sat at the kitchen island, not wanting to leave the room. I think I couldn't blame him. I kept my back to the counter so I could face the window while I worked. About 10 minutes passed without incident. I was starting to think maybe it had been some weird shared hallucination or a trick of the light when that feeling came back, stronger than ever. The kitchen seemed to get colder, and I could see goosebumps rising on Tyler's arms too. We both looked at the window at the same time. The figure was back, but different now. He was standing right at the window, and this time I could almost make out features, the suggestion of eyes, darker spots where they would be on a face. It was like looking at a person made of dense smoke or shadow. Tyler gasped. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, we stared at it, and it seemed to stare back. Baxter finally reacted, lifting his head and making a low, confused whining sound in his throat, but he didn't bark or growl. It was more like he was unsure what he was looking at. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, it was gone. Just gone. "Did you see that?" Tyler asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "I'm calling Dad," I finally managed to say, reaching for my phone with shaking hands. Mark didn't pick up. He was probably still in his meeting. I left a brief voicemail asking him to call me as soon as possible, trying to sound calm so he wouldn't worry too much. "Should we call the police?" Tyler asked. I hesitated. "And tell them what? We don't even know what we saw. Maybe we should check outside," he suggested, though he didn't sound enthusiastic about the idea. Part of me wanted to just lock all the doors and wait for Mark to come home, but the rational part of my brain insisted that if there was someone prowling around our property, we should know. "We'll go together," I said. "Bring Baxter with us." We put Baxter on his leash, though he seemed more confused than alarmed by our behavior. The three of us went to the front door, and I took a deep breath before opening it. The driveway was empty, so was our front yard and the street beyond it. It was starting to get dark now, but there was still enough light to see clearly. No sign of anyone. We walked around the entire perimeter of our house, checking bushes, looking behind the shed, even glancing up at trees and the roof, feeling silly but too scared not to be thorough. Nothing. No evidence that anyone had been there. When we came back to the front of the house, I noticed something odd about the pebbles in our driveway. There was a section near the garage where they seemed disturbed, like someone had been standing there and shifting their weight from foot to foot. But there were no footprints leading to or from that spot. It was as if someone had materialized there, stood for a while, and then dematerialized. "Mom," Tyler said quietly, pointing at the disturbed area. "I didn't notice that when we came out." "Me neither," I admitted, feeling a new wave of unease wash over me. We hurried back inside and locked the door. I called Mark again, and this time he picked up. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked immediately, probably concerned by my earlier voicemail. "Yes, no. I don't know," I stammered. "Tyler and I saw something weird outside the house. Like a person, but not quite." There was a pause. "What do you mean, not quite?" I tried to explain the whole thing, the appearances and disappearances, how both Tyler and I had seen it, how Baxter hadn't reacted until the last appearance, and how the security camera hadn't picked up anything. "I'm coming home right now," Mark said firmly. While we waited for Mark to get home, Tyler and I stayed in the living room, away from windows. Baxter seemed to have forgotten the whole incident and was happily chewing on a toy. I kept checking the security camera feed on my phone, but it showed nothing unusual. Mark got home about 20 minutes later. The first thing he did was check all around the house, just like we had, finding nothing. Then he reviewed the security footage himself, even going back several hours. Nothing. Could it have been a neighbor, he suggested. Maybe walking their dog and coming up the wrong driveway by mistake? Tyler shook his head emphatically. "Dad, it wasn't a normal person. It was like, not solid." And it disappeared right in front of our eyes. Mark looked at me, clearly concerned but trying not to show it. "You both saw the same thing?" I nodded. "In the exact same place, at the exact same time. That last time, we were both looking at it together. We ended up eating dinner in the living room, none of us saying much." Mark tried to lighten the mood, suggesting maybe we had a friendly ghost, but his joke fell flat. After dinner, none of us wanted to be alone, so we watched a movie together, though I don't think any of us paid much attention to it. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up, sure I'd heard something outside. Once, around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up to check out the window, but saw nothing. Mark woke up too, and we both stood there for a while, staring out at our empty, moonlit driveway. "What do you think it was?" I whispered. Mark put his arm around me. "I don't know, but nothing's happening now, right? Maybe it was just a weird one-time thing." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we'd seen wasn't finished with us. The next day passed without incident, so did the one after that, and the one after that. Slowly, life started to return to normal. Tyler stopped jumping at every shadow, and I stopped obsessively checking the security camera feed. But sometimes, especially in the kitchen around the same time of day, I get that feeling again, that sensation of being watched. I look up at the window, half expecting to see that shadowy figure standing there. So far, it hasn't returned. We've talked about moving, but that feels like an overreaction. This is our home. One unexplainable incident shouldn't drive us away. But I found myself researching the history of our house and the land it's built on. So far, I found nothing unusual, no tragic deaths, no ancient burial grounds, nothing that might explain what we experienced. Maybe it was just a glitch in reality, a brief overlap with something we're not meant to understand. Maybe it was nothing at all, a shared illusion brought on by what I don't even know. All I know is that both my son and I saw something that shouldn't have been possible, something that has made me question what I thought I knew about the world. And every evening, as the sun starts to set, I find myself glancing up at that kitchen window, wondering if today will be the day it returns. I'm sharing this here because I don't know where else to turn. Has anyone else experienced something similar? Any explanations that might help us make sense of what happened? Because right now, I'm at a loss, and every time I hear those pebbles shifting in our driveway, my heart stops for a moment, wondering if it's just the wind or something else entirely. I still can't believe I'm actually writing this down, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of what happened last summer. In June of 2021, I finally moved into my own place. A small but cozy apartment in Westbrook Manor. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom with a decent-sized living room, but it was mine. First time living completely on my own at 25, and I was determined to make it feel like home without blowing my entire savings on furniture. I've always been pretty crafty, so I decided to decorate by repurposing stuff from my parents' garage. They've been collecting random things since I was a kid, like literally since 1998 when we moved into that house. Dad never throws anything away because you never know when you might need it. Mom complains about it, but she's just as bad. Anyway, I've been making weekly trips over there, digging through boxes and finding all sorts of forgotten treasures, old picture frames I could paint, a coffee table that just needed new legs, that kind of thing. My apartment was slowly coming together, and I was feeling pretty proud of myself. Then came that Sunday in July when I found the mirror. It was tucked behind some old gardening equipment and a broken fan. Small, maybe 8 inches across, with this ornate white metal frame, the kind of antique-looking thing you'd find at a flea market. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and the back had these jagged edges, like it had been broken off something larger, maybe an old vanity or something. I don't know, I just thought it looked cool and vintage. I brought it home along with some other stuff and didn't think much about it. I cleaned it up and placed it on this floating shelf in my living room, propped against the wall. It looked perfect there, added a bit of that vintage charm I was going for. That's when the weird stuff started. The first time I came home from work and found the mirror face down on the shelf, I figured I hadn't positioned it correctly, so I just propped it back up more carefully. The next morning, same thing. Then it happened again that night. I started getting annoyed. I mean, it's a flat-bottom frame. It should be able to stand up on its own, right? So I decided to use some Scotch tape to secure it to the wall, just a couple pieces along the back edge to keep it from tipping forward. That worked for about 2 days. Then I came home to find the mirror on the floor beneath the shelf. The tape had ripped clean off. Weird, but not like supernatural weird, just annoying. So I grabbed some of that heavy-duty mounting tape, kind that's basically permanent, and will take the paint off your walls if you try to remove it. I applied multiple strips to the back of the mirror and pressed it firmly against the wall behind the shelf. Problem solved, right? Wrong. This is where things get really messed up, and I swear on everything I own that I'm not making this up. I had just finished mounting the mirror and decided to grab a drink from the garage fridge. Yeah, my apartment came with a small attached garage, which was a major selling point. I was gone for maybe 3 minutes. When I walked back into the living room, my heart literally stopped for a second. The mirror was lying on the floor, not beneath the shelf, but on the opposite side of the living room, a good 10 or 12 feet away. And that's not even the worst part. There was a chunk of drywall still attached to the mounting tape on the back of the mirror, like it had been ripped off the wall with enough force to take part of the wall with it. I just stood there staring at it, the cold drink sweating in my hand, trying to process what I was seeing. There was nobody else in the apartment. No windows were open, no fans were on, nothing that could explain how this mirror had not only detached itself but somehow launched across the room. I didn't touch it. I backed away slowly and called my brother Marcus. He's always been into spiritual stuff, herbs, crystals, that whole scene. I usually tease him about it, but at that moment, I wasn't laughing. He came over within the hour. I hadn't moved the mirror from where it landed. Marcus took one look at it and his face got all serious. He crouched down near it, but didn't touch it and closed his eyes for a minute. "There's something attached to this," he said finally, not in his usual dramatic way. He actually seemed genuinely concerned. "Something negative. Where did you find this?" When I told him it was from our parents' garage, he looked surprised. "I've never seen this before," he said, "and I've helped Dad clean that garage out like a dozen times." That night, Marcus performed what he called a cleansing ritual. He burned some sage, said some prayers, and sprinkled what he claimed was blessed salt around the mirror. The whole time, I felt this weird heaviness in the apartment, like the air was thick. Maybe it was just my anxiety, but it felt real. After he finished, Marcus wrapped the mirror in a black cloth and told me we needed to bury it on hallowed ground to complete the process. The idea of carrying that thing anywhere freaked me out, so I asked him to take care of it. He agreed, and I was honestly just relieved to have it out of my apartment. For a few weeks, everything went back to normal. No more strange occurrences. I patched the hole in my wall and tried to forget the whole thing. I didn't even ask Marcus what he'd done with the mirror. I just wanted it gone and forgotten. Then, about a month later, I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I was helping Mom set the table on the patio when I noticed something on the decorative table by the garden. It was the mirror, just sitting there, uncovered, catching the afternoon sunlight. I nearly dropped the stack of plates I was holding. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "where did you get that mirror?" She glanced over. "Oh, that old thing. It's always been mine. I bought it years ago from that antique shop downtown, the one that closed." I waited until we were alone and confronted Marcus. He had the decency to look guilty at least. "I buried it in the garden," he admitted, "in Mom's herbs section. It's blessed ground. She does her own rituals there all the time." But then the next day, Mom found it while gardening. She claimed it was hers and got weirdly defensive when I tried to explain. "Did you tell her what happened at my place?" I asked. "Yeah," he sighed. "That's the strangest part." She just said, "Oh, whatever was attached to it is gone now." Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I tried talking to Mom about it directly, but she brushed me off. "It's just an old mirror, Evelyn. Nothing to worry about now." The way she said now sent chills through me. The mirror is still at their house. Mom eventually moved it back to the garage after Dad complained about it being creepy. It's in almost the exact spot where I found it originally. Looking back, I've started remembering weird little things from childhood, tools that would go missing from Dad's workbench, only to reappear days later in completely different spots. The garage light that would turn on by itself in the middle of the night, the strange scratching sounds we'd sometimes hear through the wall of my bedroom, which shared a wall with the garage. I've asked Mom several times about where she actually got the mirror, but she either changes the subject or gives me vague answers that don't quite add up. Sometimes she says she bought it in 1999. Other times she claims it was 2003. The antique shop she mentions has been closed for over 15 years, so there's no way to verify. Dad claims he never noticed the mirror before I brought attention to it, as he puts it, but he also admits the garage has always been Mom's domain, even though he's the one who fills it with junk. The strangest part, I swear the mirror looks different now. The frame seems less ornate, more plain. The glass is clearer. But when I mention this to Marcus or my parents, they look at me like I'm crazy. I haven't experienced anything supernatural since removing the mirror from my apartment, but I still can't shake the memory of that day. Coming back from the garage and seeing it across the room with that chunk of wall still attached. The absolute impossibility of it. Sometimes I think about setting up a camera in my parents' garage to see if the mirror still moves on its own, but honestly, I'm afraid of what I might capture. And part of me wonders if my mom wouldn't notice and just remove the evidence somehow. I've researched mirrors with supernatural properties and found plenty of folklore about mirrors being portals or trapping spirits, but nothing that exactly matches my experience. And the fact that it was apparently cleansed so easily by my mom just being near it, that's the part that keeps me up at night. What was attached to that mirror? And more importantly, is it really gone? Or is it still in that garage waiting? Is it attached to my mother somehow? Is that why she's so protective of it? I've decorated my apartment with plenty of other items from my parent house since then, but I always check thoroughly for any weird vibes before bringing them home. And I've sworn off anything reflective, just to be safe. The weirdest thing is that sometimes when I visit my parents, I feel drawn to the garage, like something in there wants me to see it again. I've resisted so far, but the pull gets stronger every time. I know how this all sounds. Believe me, I think I was losing it too if I hadn't experienced it firsthand. But I know what I saw. That mirror moved. It tore itself from my wall with enough force to take drywall with it. And now my mother, who never showed any interest in antiques or the supernatural before, treats it like a precious possession with a history I somehow never knew about. I don't know what to make of any of this. I just know I'm never touching that mirror again. Has anyone else experienced something like this? An object that seems to have its own will, or a family member who seems strangely connected to something potentially supernatural? I need to know I'm not crazy, because right now that garage, a place I spent countless hours in as a kid, feels like the most dangerous place in the world to me. And sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment at night, I could swear I see a white frame in my peripheral vision, just for a split second, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. I've been sitting on this for almost 30 years now, and I still can't explain what happened. Even now, as I type this, the hairs on my arms are standing up. It happened back in '93, in my village in Maharashtra. I was 32 then, just a simple farmer with a small plot of land where I grew rice and vegetables. Nothing special about my life before all this. Wake up before sunrise, eat the breakfast my wife Priya prepared, then head out to the fields. Come home tired, play with my kids, eat dinner, sleep, repeat. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Our mud brick house had 3 rooms, one where Priya and I slept, one for our children Amit, who was 7, and Leela, who was 4, and the main room where we ate and spent time together. That day started like any other. It was October harvest season, so I had stayed in the fields longer than usual. The sky was already turning orange when I finally packed up my tools. My shoulders ached from cutting rice stalks all day, but I felt good. The harvest was plentiful that year. I remember taking the narrow dirt path that snaked between the fields back to our village. Usually, I'd walk back with some of the other farmers, but that day I was alone because I had stayed later. The path was lined with tall grass on both sides, and as the sun set, long shadows stretched across the ground. I was about halfway home when I first saw her. She was standing at the bend in the path, right where it curves around the old banyan tree. A woman in a white sari, standing completely still, looking away from me. At first, I thought it was somebody from the village, maybe waiting for a family member. There was nothing particularly odd about her, except that she was alone on the path at dusk, which wasn't very common for women in our village. Namaste, I called out, still about 20 feet away from her. Are you waiting for someone? She didn't respond or move. I walked closer, thinking maybe she hadn't heard me. The wind picked up suddenly, making the tall grass sway around the path. That's when I noticed something wasn't right. Her sari was moving in the wind, but differently somehow, almost like it was floating rather than just blowing. Excuse me, is everything okay? I asked, now just a few feet behind her. She slowly began to turn toward me. I'll never forget the feeling that washed over me in that moment, like someone had poured ice water down my spine. Before she fully turned, showing me her face, she disappeared. Not like she ran away or moved quickly. She just wasn't there anymore. I stood frozen, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Had I imagined it? Was I so tired from working that my mind was playing tricks? I looked around, but there was no sign of anyone. Just the empty path, the swaying grass, and the darkening sky. After a few minutes of standing there confused, I hurried home. I didn't tell Priya about it that night. It seemed silly, just a trick of the light in my tired mind, I thought. But then things started happening at home. The first incident was 3 days later. I woke up in the middle of the night hearing someone calling my name. Rajesh. Rajesh. It was barely a whisper, but clear enough that I sat up in bed. Priya was sound asleep beside me. I checked on the children, both sleeping peacefully. I even went outside to see if someone was at our door, but there was nothing. Just the quiet village night. A week after seeing the woman on the path, Priya mentioned that the corner of our main room, near the small altar where we kept our God's pictures, felt unnaturally cold. I hadn't noticed it before, but when I went to check, she was right. While the rest of the house was warm from the day's heat, that corner felt like winter. There was no draft, no open window, just cold air that seemed contained to that one spot. Then Amit started talking about the shadow lady who stood in the doorway of their room at night. He described her as tall and said she just watched them. Leela began refusing to go to the bathroom alone, saying someone was always standing behind her when she was alone. Kids have active imaginations, so we didn't think much of it at first. But things kept escalating. Objects in our house started moving. Nothing dramatic. A cup would be on the table when we went to sleep, and in the morning, it would be on the floor. The dough Priya prepared for chapati one morning had handprints in it when she returned to it after stepping away for water. Small things, but impossible to ignore. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after my encounter on the path, Priya was washing clothes outside when she screamed. I ran out to find her staring at the water in her bucket. When I looked, I saw what had frightened her. The clear water had turned red, like blood. We emptied it out, filled it again from our well, and it was clear. No explanation. The children started waking up with scratches on their arms and legs. Nothing deep, just light marks like someone had dragged a fingernail across their skin while they slept. When we asked them about it, they said the shadow lady did it, but she didn't mean to hurt them. She was just trying to wake them up so they could help her. By this point, I was terrified, but trying not to show it. In our village, we respected the supernatural, but we didn't talk much about it. Admitting your house had a ghost could bring shame or make others avoid you, so we kept it to ourselves, hoping whatever it was would go away. It all came to a head 18 days after I saw the woman in white. It was evening, around 7 o'clock. We were sitting on the floor around our small wooden table, eating dinner by the light of our oil lamp. Amit was telling us about something that happened at school. Leela was playing with her food, and Priya was reminding her to eat properly. Normal family dinner. Then everything changed in an instant. First, it was the silence. One moment we could hear the insects chirping outside, the distant sound of the village, and our own voices. The next, absolute silence, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. Priya looked at me, her eyes widening. She felt it too. The temperature in the room plummeted. Our breaths became visible in the air, like it was the dead of winter instead of autumn in Maharashtra. The flame in the oil lamp grew taller, stretching unnaturally upward, casting wild, dancing shadows on our walls. The shadows, they moved wrong. Instead of following the movement of the flame, they seemed to move independently, stretching and contracting as if they were alive. One shadow in particular, on the wall behind Priya, grew larger than the others. It took the shape of a woman in a sari. Leela saw it first and pointed, small finger trembling. "Shadow lady," she whispered. We all turned to look. The shadow was darker than the others, more solid somehow. It moved across the wall until it reached the corner where our altar was, the corner that had been cold for days. Then it seemed to step out of the wall, becoming three-dimensional. It wasn't quite solid. I could still see through it to the wall behind, but it was clearly the figure of a woman in a flowing sari. She stood there, facing us, but where her face should have been was just darkness. Priya grabbed the children, pulling them against her. I stood up, placing myself between my family and the apparition. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. The figure didn't speak, but the air in the room stirred, creating a sound almost like weeping. The oil lamp flickered wildly, and the shadows on the walls seemed to reach toward us like grasping hands. Then the apparition moved toward us, not walking but floating several inches above the ground. As it approached, I could feel a deep sadness emanating from it, along with something else, desperation. Just as it reached the edge of our table, there was a loud crack from outside, like a branch breaking, and everything stopped. The figure disappeared, the temperature returned to normal, and the sounds of the night came rushing back. We sat in shocked silence for several minutes. Leela was crying quietly against her mother's chest. Amit was pale, his food forgotten. Priya looked at me with fear in her eyes, silently asking what we should do. "Tomorrow," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "I'll speak with Arjun Bhai." Arjun was our village elder, over 70 years old, and respected for his wisdom. If anyone would know what to do, it would be him. That night, none of us slept. We all stayed in the main room, huddled together on our sleeping mats, jumping at every small sound. The children finally fell asleep near dawn, exhausted from fear. As soon as it was light, I went to Arjun's house. He was already awake, sitting on his porch and smoking his old pipe. When he saw my face, he gestured for me to sit. "Something troubles you, Rajesh," he said, not a question. I told him everything, the woman on the path, the whispers, the cold corner, the children's shadow lady, and finally, what happened during dinner. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, looking out at the village waking up around us. Finally, he spoke. 23 years ago, before you moved to this village, there was a young woman named Mira. She was married to a man from the next village, but it was not a happy marriage. Her husband was cruel, and there were rumors he beat her. He paused to tap his pipe against his palm, emptying it. One evening, she was found dead near the banyan tree on the path to the fields, the same spot where you saw the woman in white. Her husband claimed she had taken her own life out of madness, but nobody believed him. There was no proof, however, so nothing was done. My stomach turned as I realized what he was telling me. Some say, Arjun continued, that souls who die violently or with unfinished business cannot move on. They remain trapped between worlds, seeking justice or peace. But why us? I asked. Why my family? Arjun shrugged. Perhaps you were the first to notice her in many years. Perhaps she sensed in you someone who might help her find peace. How do we help her? How do we make this stop? That, he said, you will have to discover for yourself. I returned home with mixed feelings. Part of me was terrified of facing the spirit again, but another part felt a strange sense of duty. If what Arjun said was true, this woman Mira had suffered a great injustice and her soul was in torment. That evening, we performed a small ceremony in our home, following Arjun's instructions. We lit incense in a special lamp, placed fresh flowers on our altar, and I spoke directly to Mira, telling her we acknowledged her presence and asked what she needed to find peace. Nothing happened immediately, but that night I had a vivid dream. I saw a woman, her face still obscured, digging in the ground near the base of the banyan tree. She was crying as she dug with her bare hands. Then she looked directly at me, and though I couldn't see her face clearly, I felt her desperate need. The next morning, I took a shovel and went to the banyan tree. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but the dream had been so vivid that I felt compelled to dig. People passing by on the path gave me strange looks, but I ignored them. After an hour of digging around the massive roots of the tree, my shovel hit something solid. Carefully, I cleared away more dirt until I uncovered a small metal box, rusted with age. Inside was a gold Mongol sutra, the necklace given to a bride by her husband, and a folded piece of paper. The paper was a letter written in faded ink. It detailed the abuse Mira had suffered at her husband's hands and named him as her murderer. She had hidden it along with her Mongol sutra, which he had tried to steal, knowing she might not survive much longer. I took the box to the police station in the larger town nearby. The case was reopened based on the new evidence, and Mira's husband, who was still alive in the next village, was finally arrested and charged with her murder. After that, the strange occurrences in our house stopped. The cold corner became warm again. The children stopped seeing the shadow lady. The whispers at night ceased. But sometimes when I walk that path at dusk, I feel a presence nearby. Not threatening or sad anymore, but peaceful. I never see the woman in white again, but occasionally, when the wind blows through the banyan tree's leaves, it sounds almost like a thank you whispered on the breeze. I still can't explain everything that happened. Was it really Mira's spirit? Was it just coincidence that I found that box? I don't know. But I do know that what my family experienced was real, and it changed us forever. Even now, 30 years later, I still leave flowers at the base of that banyan tree whenever I pass by. Some things in this world can't be explained by logic alone. Sometimes justice finds a way, even from beyond the grave. I still can't shake what happened last week. I've told a few friends, but nobody seems to take it seriously. Maybe putting this down in writing will help me process it, or maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. I moved away from Meadowvale about 3 years ago. It's a small rural town where everyone knows everyone, and honestly, I needed to get away from that for a while, build my own life, you know? But family is family, and I still own my granddad's old property on the outskirts of town, so I came back to check on things and visit some old friends. Last Thursday, I met up with Ryan, Derek, and Shay at Fleming's, this restaurant about 20 miles from my place. We hadn't all been together in one spot since my going away party 3 years back. It was good catching up, talking about old times, their new jobs, relationships, the usual stuff. I didn't realize how much I'd missed these idiots until I was sitting there with them again, laughing about the stupid things we did in high school. We lost track of time completely. The restaurant was practically closing when we finally paid our bill. It was already past midnight when we walked out to the parking lot. The guys all live in town, but my grandfather's house is way out in the sticks, about 25 minutes of country roads and then another 10 minutes down these barely maintained gravel roads. Derek offered me his couch for the night, but I had my motorcycle and needed to check on the property anyway. It had rained earlier, but the sky had cleared up, and honestly, I love riding at night. There's something peaceful about it, just you, the road, and the stars above. Plus, my Kawasaki handles those back roads like a dream. I'm not some adrenaline junkie, but I do enjoy the feeling of freedom. The first part of the ride was completely normal. The main roads were pretty much deserted, just an occasional truck or car passing by. I saw a few deer in my headlights, keeping my distance since hitting one would definitely ruin my night. The air was cool and smelled like wet earth from the rain earlier. Everything felt right. I turned onto Blackwell Road, which is the last proper paved road before the series of gravel paths that lead to my place. This is where the countryside gets really isolated. No streetlights, houses spaced miles apart, and self-service that comes and goes as it pleases. The moon was bright enough that I could see the silhouettes of trees and fields stretching out into darkness. About halfway down Blackwell, I noticed something odd. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but it was unmistakable. I smelled perfume. Not just any perfume, but a distinctly feminine, floral scent. Strong too, like when someone wearing too much perfume walks past you in a store. It was so unexpected that I actually slowed down, thinking maybe there was someone walking along the roadside that I hadn't noticed. But there was nobody. Nothing but empty fields on either side of me. The smell lingered for about 10 seconds, then faded as I kept riding. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just some strange plant blooming at night or something carried on the wind for miles away. Then, about a quarter mile later, it happened again. The same exact perfume scent, but fainter this time. It was like passing through a cloud of it. This time, I actually stopped completely, killed the engine, and looked around. The silence was total. Just the crickets and the occasional distant owl. The road was completely empty in both directions. No cars or people anywhere. I even checked my jacket to see if maybe I'd brushed against something earlier, but no, it was just my usual leather jacket that smells like leather and a bit of my own cologne. Something about this didn't feel right. I've ridden these roads hundreds of times, and I've never experienced anything like this before. This part of the county doesn't smell like flowers or perfume. It smells like dirt, grass, cattle from the neighboring farms, and sometimes fertilizer. Not fancy floral perfume. I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. I'm not normally the type to get spooked, but being alone on a deserted country road past midnight, smelling a perfume that had no business being there, it was unsettling. I started my bike again and picked up my pace, wanting to get to the turnoff to my property. The turnoff to Meadow Creek Road is easy to miss if you don't know it's there. It's just a gravel path with an old wooden sign that's barely visible at night. As I made the turn, the smell was suddenly overwhelmingly strong, like someone had sprayed the perfume directly into my face. It was suffocating, sickly sweet and floral, with something underneath it that I can't quite describe, something unpleasant. I almost lost control of my bike because I instinctively reached up to cover my nose. My heart was pounding now. This wasn't right. There's absolutely no reason for that smell to be there. No houses nearby, no cars, no people walking around at nearly 1 o'clock in the morning on a deserted country road. The smell was so intense that my eyes started watering. I sped up, gravel crunching loudly under my tires. Meadow Creek Road is about 3 miles of loose rocks and dirt before it connects to the private drive that leads to my granddad's house. It's surrounded by dense woods on both sides, and riding it at night always requires extra focus because of the poor visibility and uneven surface. The perfume scent followed me. It wasn't constant. It would fade and then suddenly intensify like I was passing through patches of it. Each time it happened, I felt more and more uncomfortable. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see someone or something behind me, but there was nothing but darkness. About halfway down Meadow Creek, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, just a quick flash of something pale by the tree lean to my right. I jerked my head to look, but whatever it was, if anything, was gone. Probably just an animal, I told myself, maybe a deer or a fox. But combined with the inexplicable perfume, it made my skin crawl. I was going faster than I should have on that gravel road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to get home as quickly as possible. The woods seemed to press in closer to the road, the trees forming black walls on either side. My headlight carved a narrow path forward, but beyond that small circle of light was utter darkness. The perfume came again, stronger than ever, and this time I swear I heard something too, like a soft laugh. Not loud, just barely audible over the sound of my engine. It could have been the wind or my imagination working overtime, but it sounded feminine and close, as if someone was sitting right behind me on the bike. I nearly lost control again, twisting around to look behind me even though I knew nobody was there. My back tire skidded on the loose gravel, and I had to focus on straightening out before I ended up in a ditch. My hands were sweating inside my gloves, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. When I finally reached the turnoff to my property, marked by a cattle gate that I have to open manually, I was so on edge that I almost didn't want to stop. But I had to get through the gate, so I brought the bike to a halt and quickly dismounted. As soon as I killed the engine, the silence of the countryside crashed down around me. No traffic noise, no distant voices, just the subtle sounds of the natural world and my own ragged breathing. I hurried to unlock the padlock on the gate, constantly looking over my shoulder. The perfume was still there, but fainter now. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled with the lock for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. Once I got it open, I swung the gate wide, rushed back to my bike, and rode through. I would normally stop to close and lock the gate behind me, but I was too freaked out. I just wanted to get to the house. My grandfather's place is about half a mile up a dirt driveway from the gate, surrounded by old oak trees and set back in a small clearing. Usually, I find it charming and peaceful. That night, the dark windows and isolated location just made it look forbidding. As I approached the house, I hit the remote for the garage door that I'd clipped to my jacket. The door began its slow ascent, and I aimed my bike for the opening, desperate to get inside. That's when the perfume hit me again, so strong that it made me gag, and with it came that same soft laugh, right in my ear. I gunned the engine and shot into the garage, nearly hitting the workbench along the back wall. I scrambled off my bike, slammed my hand against the button to close the garage door, and backed away, watching the gap slowly close. The perfume smell was inside the garage with me now, hanging heavy in the air. When the garage door finally closed with a solid thunk, I felt a momentary sense of relief. But I still needed to get into the house itself. The door connecting the garage to the kitchen has a deadbolt that requires a key. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my key ring twice before managing to get the right key in the lock. As I fumbled with the door, I became aware of a pressure change, like when someone enters a room behind you. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and the perfume smell intensified. I was absolutely certain that if I turned around, I would see someone standing there, but the rational part of my brain screamed not to look, to just get the door open and get inside. The lock finally turned, and I practically fell into the kitchen, slamming the door behind me and throwing the deadbolt. I hit every light switch I could find, flooding the house with light. Then I just stood there in the kitchen, back against the door, breathing hard, trying to calm down. The house was silent and empty, just as I'd left it that morning. But even inside, I could still smell traces of that perfume. I checked every room, turned on every light, looked in closets and under beds like a scared kid. Nothing, nobody. But the smell lingered. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house settling. By morning, the perfume smell had finally dissipated, and daylight made everything seem more normal. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress, exhaustion, and an overactive imagination combining to freak me out. But here's the thing that's been keeping me awake since then. When I finally worked up the courage to go back out to the garage the next day, I noticed something on my motorcycle that I hadn't seen the night before. On the back seat, there was a small wet spot, as if someone had spilled liquid there. When I leaned close to look at it, I could smell it, the same perfume, concentrated and strong. I've asked around town if there have ever been any stories about that stretch of road. No one's mentioned anything specific, but old Mr. Greaves at the hardware store gave me an odd look when I described where exactly I'd been riding. He asked if I'd smelled anything strange before his wife called him away. When I tried to ask him about it later, he just shook his head and said I should stick to the main roads at night. I'm back in the city now, but I can't stop thinking about what happened. Sometimes when I'm riding my bike here, I catch myself checking my mirrors more often, half expecting to smell that perfume again. What was it? Who was it? And why do I have this nagging feeling that whatever it was, it followed me home? I never thought I'd be the kind of person sharing experiences like this. For most of my life, I was the guy who'd roll his eyes at ghost stories and supernatural claims. I had built my entire worldview around logic, reason, and the physical laws of the universe. If you couldn't measure it or prove it with science, it didn't exist, period. But something happened to me last summer that I still can't explain. I spent months trying to rationalize it, but I keep coming back to the same conclusion. What I experienced that night at La Salette was real. I live in Attleboro, Massachusetts, a quiet town that most people probably haven't heard of unless they're from around here. It's not the kind of place where exciting things happen, except we do have the National Shrine of Our Lady of La Salette, a Catholic shrine with beautiful grounds that attracts visitors year-round, especially during their Christmas light display. My grandmother used to take me there when I was a kid. I didn't care about the religious aspect back then. I was more interested in the lights and the little pond with the ducks. As I grew older, I became increasingly skeptical about religion. By college, I consider myself a full-blown atheist and prided myself on being too rational for spiritual beliefs. This mindset served me well through my 20s and early 30s. I built a career as a software engineer, made good money, but something always felt missing. At first, I thought it was just the usual mid-30s existential crisis. Maybe I needed to change jobs or move to a different city. Then, about 8 months ago, something began to shift. It wasn't sudden, more like a gradual awakening. I started feeling drawn to questions I'd previously dismissed. What's the purpose of all this? Is there more to reality than what we can measure? The certainty I once had about the non-existence of anything spiritual began to crack. I started reading not just atheist philosophers I'd previously embraced, but religious and spiritual texts from various traditions. I meditated. I had conversations with friends who were believers. I wasn't ready to call myself religious, but I was definitely questioning my previous convictions. That brings me to that night in July. It was unusually cool for summer, around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, with a clear sky full of stars. I've been feeling restless all day, like something was pulling at me. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, I felt an inexplicable urge to visit La Salette. It sounds weird, I know. Who visits a religious shrine at night? But the feeling was so strong, I couldn't ignore it. The shrine officially closes at 9, but the grounds remain accessible. When I arrived around 9:30, the parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 other cars. The main buildings were closed and dark, but the paths through the grounds were dimly lit by small lights along the walkways. I remember feeling strangely calm as I stepped out of my car. The air was cool and still, with that particular summer night smell of grass and earth. Crickets were chirping everywhere. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in, wondering why I felt so compelled to come here after all these years. The shrine has these paths where you can walk the Stations of the Rosary, a series of small shrines with statues depicting scenes from the life of Jesus. I'm not Catholic, but I remembered the basic layout from my childhood visits. I started walking along the path, my footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. I wasn't thinking about anything specific, just letting my mind wander while enjoying the peacefulness. There were no other visitors that I could see, and the quiet was profound, just the crickets, the occasional rustle of leaves, and my footsteps. I made it about halfway through the stations when I felt something change. It's hard to describe, but the air seemed to become different, heavier somehow, but not in an oppressive way. More like it had become more substantial, more present. The crickets had gone silent, which I didn't notice immediately, but would later realize. I stopped walking and looked around, trying to identify what had changed. That's when I saw it. About 40 feet away, near the shrine of the crucifixion, was a figure. At first, I thought it was another visitor, someone wearing white clothes that seemed to catch what little light there was. But as I focused on it, I realized several things weren't right. The figure was moving in a way I can't properly describe. It was walking, yes, but also gliding, like its feet weren't quite touching the ground. And the white garment it wore wasn't just white. It had a luminescence to it, not bright like a flashlight, but more like how those glow-in-the-dark stars look on a bedroom ceiling. Enough to make the figure visible in the darkness, but not enough to illuminate the area around it. Even stranger, the figure didn't seem to cast any shadow, despite the path lights that should have created one. My first thought was that someone was playing a prank. Maybe they had some kind of LED clothing. But that didn't explain the strange movement or the lack of shadow. I expected to feel afraid, but I didn't. Not even slightly. Instead, I felt an intense curiosity and, this is going to sound weird, a sense of recognition, like I was seeing something I'd always known existed but had never acknowledged. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet night. The figure didn't respond. It continued its strange movement along the path, seemingly unaware of me. I started walking toward it, moving slowly and carefully. As I got within maybe 25 feet, the figure stopped. It didn't turn toward me or show any awareness of my presence, but it definitely stopped moving. I took a few more steps forward, and that's when things got truly inexplicable. The figure simply vanished. Not like it ran away or ducked behind something. There was nowhere to hide anyway. It disappeared like someone had switched off a light. I stood there, blinking in confusion, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I walked to the spot where the figure had been and looked around. Nothing. No footprints, no disturbance in the gravel path, no indication that anyone had been there. "Hello." I called again, louder this time. "Is someone there?" Only silence answered me. I was about to give up, thinking maybe I'd imagined it all, when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I turned quickly, and there it was again, the same glowing white figure, but now it was about 60 feet away in the completely opposite direction, near the Garden of Gethsemane shrine. This was physically impossible. There was no way anyone could have moved that distance so quickly without me seeing or hearing them. The gravel paths would have made noise, and there was no direct route between the 2 points. They would have had to circle around several structures. Yet there it was, moving with that same not quite walking motion. This time, I decided to approach more carefully. I walked slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the figure, afraid it would disappear again if I blinked too long. As I got closer, I began to make out more details. The figure appeared to be about my height, maybe slightly taller. The white garment covered most of its body, flowing down to what would be its feet, though I couldn't actually see them. I still couldn't make out any facial features, just a suggestion of a head and the flowing white robes. When I was about 20 feet away, something else strange happened. The figure raised what seemed to be an arm, not pointing at me, but more like a gesture of acknowledgement or perhaps blessing. It's hard to describe, but it felt intentional, directed at me. Then it vanished again. I spun around, expecting to see it reappear somewhere else, and I was right. It was now near the entrance to the shrine grounds, at least 100 yards away. This pattern continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 or 30 minutes. The figure would appear, I would approach, it would vanish and reappear somewhere else, defying all physical limitations of speed and movement. What strikes me most in retrospect is how unafraid I was. There was something about the presence that felt benevolent, reassuring. I can't find the right word, but despite the strangeness of it all, I never felt threatened. If anything, I felt like I was being shown something important. The final appearance was the most profound. The figure appeared near the central shrine, the one depicting the apparition of Mary at La Salette. It was closer than it had been previously, maybe 15 feet away. For the first time, I felt like it was looking directly at me, though I still couldn't make out a face. The air around us seemed to vibrate with an energy I've never felt before or since. It wasn't electrical or static. It was something else entirely, like the air itself had become charged with meaning. The figure raised both arms slightly in what I can only describe as a welcoming gesture. Then, instead of vanishing instantly like before, it seemed to fade gradually, becoming more transparent until it was gone completely. As it faded, I experienced the most overwhelming sense of peace I've ever felt. It washed over me like a wave, bringing tears to my eyes. I don't know how long I stood there afterward, but eventually I became aware of the crickets chirping again and realized the strange heaviness in the air had lifted. I walked back to my car in a daze. The digital clock on my dashboard read 12:17. I'd been there for nearly 3 hours, though it hadn't felt that long. I drove home in silence, not even turning on the radio. My mind was racing, trying to process what had happened. The logical part of me wanted to find a rational explanation, a prank, a light projection, a hallucination brought on by stress or exhaustion. But none of these explanations fit what I'd experienced. Over the following days and weeks, I researched everything I could about the shrine, about apparitions, about phenomena that could explain what I saw. I found stories of other people who claimed to have seen strange lights or figures there, but nothing that matched my experience exactly. I went back to La Salette several times, always at night, hoping to see the figure again. I never did, but each visit left me with that same sense of peace. It's been 8 months now, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. I don't know if what I saw was an angel, a ghost, or something else entirely. What I do know is that it was real as the keyboard I'm typing on right now, as real as anything I've ever experienced. The most profound change has been in my worldview. I can no longer call myself an atheist. I don't know exactly what I believe, but I'm certain there's more to this reality than what we can measure or explain with science. There's a dimension to existence that I was blind to before. I haven't told many people about this experience. It's not something you can casually bring up at dinner parties, especially when you spent most of your adult life ridiculing supernatural nonsense. The few friends I have shared this with have reacted with varying degrees of skepticism, which I understand completely. 8 months ago, I would have reacted the same way. Sometimes I wonder if the experience was meant specifically for me, a tailor-made wake-up call for someone who needed their rigid worldview shattered. Other times I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to witness something that exists regardless of whether we acknowledge it or not. What I witnessed that night at La Salette defied everything I thought I knew about how the world works. It moved in ways that violated the laws of physics. It appeared and disappeared at impossible distances. It emitted light without any visible source. But the most inexplicable part wasn't the physical impossibility of what I saw. It was the feeling that came with it, that profound sense of peace and recognition, the certainty bone deep that I was in the presence of something benevolent and real. I still don't have answers, I still don't know what to call what I experienced, but I no longer need to label it to accept that it happened. Some experiences transcend our limited vocabularies and categories. The world is stranger and more wonderful than I ever allowed myself to believe, and somehow knowing that makes everything else make more sense.